Professional.
So sure. Would you like me to go back? I know we've been going for a bit now, pal. So I don't know, or like, because we.
And now that we're live, probably let the YouTube viewers know what's going on.
So YouTube viewers, we actually realized that we were recording, but we are lovely and getting right back into this. And so with us being away for so long, we actually ended up forgetting to actually hit live. Now we've only been going for a couple of minutes. They were a good couple of minutes, but a couple of minutes nonetheless. So now we are going to debate whether or not restarting. I'm fine with restarting that if you want to do that.
Yeah, sure. I'll just say something totally different this time.
Exactly. Just call us out on it. It'll be great.
Yeah. No, I'll be like,
then we'll be able to put
deja vu for some reason. I feel like
exactly.
Only TikTok viewers will know. Yeah.
Only the real fans.
You have to watch it several times to understand what really happened on the one with the films podcast. Yeah.
Truly. We are a podcast that you have to listen to multiple times to get it. Maybe that's why we don't have as many viewers, but question there.
The monitor and output, I can see what happened. Okay. So I had audio. Essentially, if you're on TikTok right now, besides seeing this behind the scenes look at what happens when you stuff up and you're out of a little bit of practice, they got audio and everything. You should be able to hear me now, Kenny.
Well, he's on a delay, keep in mind.
Up. So should be okay.
Yeah, I can't confirm on the YouTube stream. There's no sound coming from you.
Yeah.
But now, but it should be okay in a second. Hold on.
Oh, no, it is. It is working. I can hear it now.
I hear it too.
Perfect.
Got it.
Okay.
Perfect.
Cool. So very
so
sorry
let's
about
give
that,
it another.
Wow.
Hey, now we get to see if it's actually good because we're gonna do it twice and we're gonna see if we get the same laughs. Is what's gonna happen. Like so.
Okay. Okay. Well, for those who just joined us on YouTube, this is episode 44 of One with the Films. We're talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Kay will kick us off with an intro.
Absolutely, guys. And for the first time ever, here we go. Welcome. I am Cal 4000. Welcome to One with the Films. The primary objective appears to be to entertain, almost talk about The Last Jedi, and create somewhat sexual tension amongst all guests. I believe that this will be a season finale to remember. Now, I direct your attention and applause to the three beautiful people in your ears and on your screen. Oh, well, thank you so much, Cal. That was a great thing. Well done. Absolutely. I hope you really just, hope this doesn't go horribly wrong for me later when I turn my pod around. But, it'll be fine. It'll be all good. Anyway, guys, hey there. Welcome back to the land of the living. Thank you all for welcoming us back and just getting us back in here. We haven't been gone long, but don't you worry about it. Welcome back to One with the Films. It's been a hectic couple weeks, let me tell you. And listen, lots of redacted stories and, nights in the Philippines, but I'm not even going to bother you with, the story of how we reinvented the shake weight or fought off several raccoon con men. We're just here to talk about a film that I never thought I would watch sober. Now, who am I, though? Who is this guy, talking to you? Well, I'm your glow-up grown-up, your Indio Jones, your James Pigeon, I'm sorry, I disappeared into the Bad Batch Season 3. What did you say? And it's just me. It's Movie K-Man the Third, also known as K, also known as Keegan. But, I'm joined by, the King of Kings, the apple to my eye, the sweetest peach, the Barbie to my Alan, the 2000 in one, the by man in your panoram. It's Naf. Hey, Naf, how you doing, boy?
You forgot one key part of my, description. The key things about my personality, my skill set that you forgot to mention, and it's like the king of streaming software that understands
you're right.
how those products work.
Absolutely. You're the king of technology. I did forget that. Yes. There is a reason that you are Disney bounding tech, right?
I mean,
like there is right. Like that is it is a put the glasses on. There he is.
I wish I was actually
there. He is.
I wouldn't be embarrassed by this, but for those of you listening in what's it called, on demand, you won't realize, but this is how like cheeky little second ago with this. So hopefully it's coming across as a first time thing. So yay. But hi, I'm Naf. Thank you so much for joining us. Also known as On the Second Thought, and as we said, the master of technology here. It definitely was not my fault. I didn't have a Hal to help me keep things on track. It's just me, baby. It's just me. But yeah, hi. That's all I have for you.
It's fantastic. Absolutely. You're fantastic. We love you. You're all great. It's going to be fantastic. But now, truly, we gotta do our man justice. We have an incredible guest for you guys today for our season 2 guest episode finale. As we round into our One with the Filmies and our awards night and all of this, but we have truly one of the best YouTubers out there. Like, truly, again, I am very literally and objectively saying this. There is no debate here. This man is the best video essayist in the entire world. And I mean, truly, many have tried, few have succeeded. This man has been referenced on our videos so much that I feel like we owe him some amount of royalties, but we're poor, so we're not going to do that. And so as we continue on, though, there's truly no one we admire more in this space than the man we have here today. The one, the only, Artur, known as Parks. Parks, get on in here. It's not like you've heard this before. Get in here. So... welcome to the show, buddy. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone watching. Yeah, it's great to be on here, especially Keegan. I don't know if we would have an opportunity to bring this up later on in the show, so I figured I'd say it now. But we met in person last year at Star Wars Celebration. And up to that point, it was really just like a DM exchange of, you reached out to me because you like my videos, and I'd be like, hey, man, thank you so much. But, we got to meet each other at Celebration, which was really cool. I signed a poster. I don't remember what the poster was for.
It's up there.
Oh, that's so sick. And you had a bunch of people sign it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Your signature is next to people like Andy Serkis, Ming-Na Wen, like Michelle Ong. We have like a fair amount of, and then a lot of our guests as well.
It would be really cool at some point, Keir. We were talking about scanning the oncoming one. It actually would be pretty cool if we could find a way to get that scanned and we could actually upload it onto like Instagram and stuff too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, you are correct. But yes, that is correct. We do have the poster, but this is a true story. This is an absolute true story.
And since then, you've been trying to get me on your show, this show. But Saturday nights have always conflicted with D&D night. And so I regret to, if any of my D&D parties watching, I don't think they are. They're probably all mad at me for having to cancel for tonight to be on a podcast. I don't think they like that reason.
I was about to say, as a DM, I feel like I have let my brethren down.
Yeah,
I feel, but at the same time, I also go, but fuck y'all, look at this. So,
yeah,
but absolutely.
Exactly.
It's so cool to have.
But I'm glad we're finally able to do this. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and again, getting a chance to meet you at Celebration was just so much fun. And again, getting a chance to share our love of Clone Wars, Bad Batch, talk about all of that, and or all of it was just such a great little moment and such a really cool thing. And now getting a chance to talk about a film that honestly, Naf and I were talking about that, like, one of the reasons why we kind of started this podcast in the first place was to be able to talk about films like this.
Yeah.
And it's such an exciting moment. So going with that, Naf, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah, well, I have no idea, clearly, which is why we had what happened at the start of this episode. No,
absolutely, but
hell no. That's
hell no. There we go.
That does come from being a little bit out of practice, because we've been off the last couple of weeks. It's been a pretty crazy life for Kay and for myself. So yeah, there's been a few episodes that we've had to skip on. This is, however, our season 2 finale, technically, with our guests. So Parks is our last guest of season 2. All the previous episodes that haven't gone up yet should be up tonight or over the next couple of days as well. So you'll be able to find One with the Films anywhere you get your podcasts. So Apple, Spotify, live and on demand on YouTube, all that jazz. But essentially, we're here to talk about films. And over the next 2 weeks, which will be our last 2 episodes of season 2 before we take a bit of a mid-season break or a between-season break, we're going to have our sort of our version of the Oscars come out. So me and Kay talking about a lot of our favorite films from 2023. And if you want to get a look at what some of those nominees are going to be, definitely follow One with the Films on Instagram and TikTok. And anywhere else you kind of get your social medias. We're on all the channels. But we'll be there. We'll be able to talk about some of the films that more resonated with us as opposed to just going through what happened at the Oscars. So look forward to that. And then following that, we'll have our One with the Filmies, where we will take the 20-something films that we've had given to us by guests over this season, and we're going to put them against one another and give out some awards to some of our some of these really cool films that we got to watch that we never would have watched previously. As Kay was saying, like 2001 is a film that really probably never would have come across. And we got to watch
Absolutely. And what other kind of award show could you see Reign of Fire go up against 2001: A Space Odyssey?
There you go.
All I'm saying is,
to think about.
you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Is like, that's why you got to tune in, is to see like how Naf and I reconcile. Like, I mean, last year we had Schindler's List and Groundhog Day in the same tournament.
Yeah.
This is a true story.
Amazing.
Oh my God, come and see us going up against Reign of Fire. Come and See and Legend are all in.
Yeah.
Fuck. Like, this is a stacked year, because we got like Saving Private Ryan, like Come and See, 2001, but then we also have like Reign of Fire, The Illusionist, American Graffiti.
Which you also you have some films you have to watch before the end too, Kay, because you haven't watched One Cut of the Dead yet.
I know. There's like 3 or 4 that I gotta watch.
Jung-E, and which other one was it? I can't remember.
The Signal as well. I haven't seen The Signal.
Yeah. The Signal.
That was one that you don't have on the list that we need to put on there.
I'm just realizing that now. Cool. I'll add that in. Anyway, so yeah.
But nonetheless,
join us. That's going to be sick. But with regards to today, what we're doing is essentially another episode of the Weekly Watchers. Like we said, it's our last episode of the Weekly Watch List for season 2, and long-time listeners will know exactly what you're in for. And if you are showing up for the first time, if you're uninitiated and you've spontaneously stumbled across our little corner of the internet, welcome to One with the Films. Today, we're rocking the Weekly Watch List, where we're back with a new film every week, obviously starting from season 3. We're back on the tail end of summer, sort of mid-July. But every week, we have this cheeky little gimmick that we love. Instead of just talking about films that everybody has already generally seen and agreed are the best films of all time, we're watching one of someone else's favorite films for the first time. So the little gimmick is that somebody on the podcast hasn't seen that film before. And for this one, we'll break down who that was. That being said, once we know that and we watch it, we get to sit here all afternoon and just talk about it. And it helps us work through our own pesky watch list. I think I've found that since doing the podcast, there have been films that I've kind of refused to watch because I'm waiting for a guest to go, that's my favorite film, watch it for that. You know, like for Die Hard, we got to do that when Kay was like, watch it. And then now I've seen all of them, which was a wild ride. And by all of them, I mean 4 films. So whether you're here or you've been here for ages or you're here for the first time, welcome. And we're really happy to have you. And we're always really grateful for getting a little bit of time out of your Saturday night to sit and chat with us. So, yeah. That being said, we have said it. If you've clicked on the video, you know what film we're talking about today. We're talking about, well, why don't I give it over to you, Parks? You can introduce the film for us, and then we'll go into some fun facts.
Sure. We're talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is posted up on my letterbox as one of my 4 favorite films. However, and this may surprise you guys, I have seen it only 3 times.
Wow.
So I don't really, I know some people have different sort of criteria for something to become one of their favorites. It has to be something that maybe, you revisit over and over and over, and that makes it your favorite. It's something that is maybe a comfort movie or something. But for me, I don't know. I every time I've watched this movie has been such like a amazing experience. And then the best part of it is almost, and I wouldn't really say this of other movies that I consider to be my favorite, but the discussion that you have after watching it is like epic. It's like, dude, like I'm reaching a part of my brain I never get to reach with any other movie. And that's just a testament to like just how timeless this movie is, in my opinion. It is also at the same time a movie that, I think I said this when we were talking earlier in the pre-show. If I showed it to someone and they hated it, I would totally understand. But that being said, I still love it, and I cannot wait to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm pumped too. It's gonna definitely, I think, as you said, it's a film that prompts discussion, and I think that has it at odds for some people from time to time too, because it's a bit like it doesn't give you all the answers. And yeah, I'm definitely keen to get into its sort of the things that it did that feel commonplace now, but at the time probably didn't. And then also some of the things that even for watching a film from these days, it's a bit like, hold on, what? It's definitely well ahead of its time. But I've put together some fun facts. Now, just note with this film that is obviously one of the most beloved films of all time, and there's so much about it that I found, and I just tried to simplify it down to a couple of things that I found interesting. But of course, if either of you guys know any other things that you want to like drop on our listeners as well, or on me, I'm so happy to hear it. So you guys want to hear some fun facts then?
Absolutely, Neff. I want to hear all of your fun facts.
Too bad.
You take a little drink of water there.
Okay, so let me just get in character. I'm kidding. So, beginning principal photography. Do you mind?
Oh, sorry. I just was giving you encouragement.
Okay, so beginning principal photography at Shepperton Studios in England on the 29th of December 1965 with a planned shooting schedule of 120 days. Shooting ultimately lasted over 8 months. This was followed by an additional year in post-production. It was the 8th film directed by visionary Stanley Kubrick, and after adjustments for inflation, this film had a budget of about 80 million USD, so it's still on the low end for something that would have been made today, and brought in about 400 million USD at the box office. It was written by both Kubrick as well as the author of the novel of the same name, from which the film is based. That's Arthur C. Clarke, and he actually went on to write 2 sequels to the book, one of which was adapted into a film in 1984 to moderate success, which I actually wrote before looking at its page on IMDb and realizing that the 1984 sequel, which is called 2010, The Year We Made Contact, was nominated for 5 Oscars, and that is 1 Oscar more than 2001: A Space Odyssey was nominated, which is
sacrilege.
Wild. It's so wild.
Yeah,
and so it came out in 1984. 2001 came out in 1968, so it's nearly 20 years later. And 2001 has stood the test of time, however. It sits at 94 on the highest rated films of all time on IMDb, and it sits at 130 in the Letterboxd Top 250. So it has an 8.3 out of 10 and a 4.3 out of 5, respectively. The movie wasn't a financial success at first. MGM was actually planning to pull it back from theaters, but several theater owners persuaded them to keep showing the film because they'd noticed the increasing numbers of young adults attending the film. They were especially enthusiastic about watching the Stargate sequence under the influence of psychedelic drugs.
Of course.
Which, just to clarify, my third watch of the film will be exactly that.
Let's go.
This
Naf, when you come out here, that's when we're going to watch it together.
We'll find it. We'll be like just chilling in Yosemite, watching it on my laptop, tripping balls.
Dude, that is what we gotta do. We gotta do it in Yosemite. We gotta fucking do that under that shit under the stars,
Go
man.
to Death Valley and recreate the Dawn of Man sequence. Covered in mud, beating you with a bone.
Who wants to get beaten to death?
Which one of us? It truly was a coin flip scenario.
Yeah, but that actually helped the film become a bit more of a financial success. And then rather than using blue screen,
Amazing.
Stanley Kubrick filmed all of the model shots against black backgrounds and required the compositing work to be done by a team of British animators, painting traveling mats hand by frame to mask out each element. When production ended, most of the animators actually signed on to Yellow Submarine in order to work on something colorful after spending 2 years painting little black blobs. And as just
blame them.
There are so many other nuggets of facts here. Before today, actually, as I was getting ready, I was watching on YouTube a video called 2001, where am I? A Space Odyssey. So it's called On the Shoulders of Kubrick, The Legacy of 2001. And it had a bunch of creators. It's available to listen to for free on YouTube, just on Warner Bros. Page. But it had like George Lucas and Dennis Muren and Ben Burt. And I mean,
can you share that? I want to see that. Yeah.
I'll send it. I'll send it in our group chat too, so you can check it out too.
Yeah, perfect.
But
yeah, absolutely. Like, that sounds great.
It was wild, and they were talking about a lot of how they basically recreated things in full size to give the
incredible
impression of how they put stuff on screen. It's mind blowing. And if we started talking about how they did some of that stuff, we could go on forever. There is so much to break down there.
I know one thing
we'll go into, but I'm curious.
Okay, then I'll save that for then. Yeah.
Like we could definitely all get into that in just a second, because I feel like we're going to go into a lot of the effects and all of that shit and all of the things there.
Well, before we go into the next section and we start breaking down the film, we've got 3 different levels of having watched the film before. So, being the film that you've brought to us, Parks, you had, I guess, the most knowledge of the film. You mentioned you've watched it about 3 times, yeah?
Yes, which is one more than you, but yeah.
I think also
3, 2, 1
with both of us,
there we go.
We had, was your first watch the same as my first watch? Was it in cinemas?
It was in cinemas, yes.
Yeah.
I saw it in 2018 in IMAX. It was the 50th anniversary of the film.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a crazy experience. And if I may share the story around that, because it's a big part of why this is one of my favorite movies.
Dude,
all right. Love the enthusiasm. All right, here we go.
Hey, that's my job, brother.
I don't know if you've noticed yet, but literally like everything that comes out of your mouth is gold to us. So like it's fine.
Oh, well, all right. Careful what you wish for. Yeah, so 2018, I was having probably one of the most depressing periods of my life. A lot of things were going wrong. I was going through a breakup, had some family drama, lots of sort of crippling anxiety about going to college, going to film school. I was just having a really rough time. And a couple movies kind of saved me from that, which was really insignificant because that was like a summer where I was, I'd say I've called myself like a cinephile, and like I've loved movies since probably middle school, and watching a movie every week or as often as possible is a ritual I've maintained more or less since like the start of high school. So for me to be, in this depressing period where I just wasn't watching anything for like months, something was really wrong with me. 2 movies really got me out of that though.
Ooh. Hold on one second. What's happened here? Guys, sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Terrible anxiety about the whole situation.
Yeah. Hold on one second, Parks. Naf disappeared. So we're gonna I can hear you now, Naf. You're fine here, so I'm gonna guess you're gonna pop up on OBS in just 1 second.
Yep, I've just fixed that, I think. Sorry about that, Parks. I was listening to you and then you went muted and I was like, why is he muted? And then I watched myself disappear from everything. Yeah. My actual
gotcha.
My chat page on the internet died, which let me make sure it's still there. Okay.
So technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Yep.
If
But we're good
anything,
now. We're good to go here.
You
What was the
would've-
last thing you heard me say?
It was you explaining just about
Mission.
No,
was it
so
Fallout.
no, so I would have missed all of that because once it mutes for me, obviously it mutes on the stream too. So
Sure.
I'd be saying just head back to, and let me just time code this as well so we can edit it out.
I also
we're
did
sitting
too.
at about 38 mins. Thank you, Kay. I would say go back to just as you were talking about. You mentioned going through a bad breakup and that you weren't watching a lot of stuff. That's
Right.
about where I heard.
Okay.
So we're good.
Okay.
We're good. We're online now.
So, yeah. So, for me, like not going to the movies necessarily, but watching a new movie I haven't seen like every week or as often as I could has been a ritual I've had since like high school, the beginning of high school. So for me to have this period in the summer before college where I wasn't watching anything for like a few months, I was in a really bad way. I wasn't, something was really wrong. And two movies really got me out of that sort of depression period. Like a lot of other things happened too that helped me out of that. But I think two things really like just gave me sort of an appreciation for what I was, who I was and what I wanted to do and that sort of thing. Speaking very broad strokes here without getting into specifics, of course.
Absolutely.
But one of those movies was Mission Impossible Fallout, which is a movie I fucking adore. That
was the first Mission Impossible I saw. I hadn't seen any of the others, and I was in Hong Kong that year, and we went to the cinemas, and we were like, "Oh, I wonder if we should go and watch that." We went and watched it, and I was just like, "What?" And that is saying, I couldn't believe it, and I still haven't seen all the other.
Oh,
films
that
yet.
slapped.
But yeah, I did not anticipate.
Oh, they're so great to go through.
Yeah, I've seen a
Fallout might be the best one, but they're great.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you were saying so. Fallout was one, and I'm assuming 2001 was the other.
The 2001 was the other one, and I saw it, I think, either a day or 2 days before I moved into college. And as I said before, I had a lot of anxiety about the whole college situation, and so I remember, it's a movie that was on my watch list for a while. You look up, greatest movies of all time, 2001 pops up somewhere. Yeah. So I was like, shoot, I got to see this in theaters. I go to college in 2 days. I should be packing. I don't care. I need to go see this thing because there's no better time for me to see this. And I saw it in an almost completely empty IMAX screening.
Wow.
The quality was incredible. But the one other person in the theater, I think during like the intermission that's in the middle of the movie, it's this older guy who comes over to me and says, "Tell me, do the stars kind of look like seeds to you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "It's almost like it's being like there's like two projections overlapping and the stars are like, slightly askew and they look kind of like seeds where they're like next to each other." And I'm like, "Oh, I kind of see that. Yeah." And I don't remember exactly what I said next, but it was something basically being like, "Well, here's what I know about projectors, and I'm studying film, by the way," and that sort of thing. And he was like, "Oh, so you're a film student?" I'm like, "Well, I'm about to be. I'm actually in like a day or two. I'm moving to college, and I'm going to start studying film." Wow. And he was like, "Oh, wow, that's so great." And he said some supportive, nice things, and then the movie continued because the intermission was over, and I was completely and utterly mesmerized by everything I watched. And then after the movie ended, I think I left during the credits, and then I realized I like forgot my hat or something, so I went back in the theater, grabbed it, came back out. This old guy is now getting picked up, I presume, by his wife on the curb, and they were like, he was like, "What did you think of the movie?" And I was like, my mind is blown. That was absolutely insane. And the wife was like, "That's your first time watching the movie?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, how exciting." And I'm like, wow, like that's just so cool. Like these two random, elderly people who love movies, how often do you encounter that in like, anywhere, but yeah, they were like, "Good luck with school. We wish the best for you. Hopefully you can make something like that one day." And I'm like, "Oh, there's no way." But it was kind of just, it was like a good Samaritan type experience that for me being really down on myself for many months, it was like, wow, man, like people can be really nice. And in a way, it was like the best possible thing I could have experienced right before starting this new chapter of like something I was really passionate about, where it's like,
That's beautiful.
You've just watched one of the best movies of all time. Now, you know, go and try and do something of your own, you know?
Yeah.
So
just that kind of like, here's a pat on the back from like Father Cinema, and just like go and like go on with life, my son. Like go on. Yeah, exactly.
That is that
no,
is
that's
really
incredible.
Beautiful. It's
now as opposed to that. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
You go. Okay, you go.
I was gonna say, Naf, if you, I mean, I don't know if you had more of a comment on that story, because I was just gonna transition us into what you knew about the film, because obviously you've seen it.
Yes. So, funnily enough, so in Melbourne, the IMAX screen, they've actually started doing this thing called BIFF, which is the biggest IMAX film festival. So each year they'll replay a bunch of the classics and things. And I actually saw this film for the first time in IMAX as well. And anybody who's listened before has heard me like rant about Melbourne's IMAX screen like crazy. It's insane. I love it so much. It's my favorite thing about being here. The film community in Melbourne, I have found on both sides of the spectrum. Some people that are like beautiful and wonderful to speak to, and the other side of people that can be really pretentious. And that was something that unfortunately I experienced in my IMAX viewing too. We're talking about this in the pre-show a bit, Parks, but I don't know if I told you this, Kay, but when I was sitting there in IMAX to watch this film for the first time, and this was last year, I hadn't seen the film before. I hadn't seen a film like this before. Any other films that I'd seen from this, you know, time period or older had happened at home. But this film opens with like just silent and music. And when you're in a theater and you've not seen that before, and I'm so used to the lights are already off and we're on, I'm hearing this noise and I'm like, what's going on? And me, one of my friends and his girlfriend all went to watch it together. And all three of us hadn't seen it before. And we're all just kind of like, is something like broken? And I could understand the external perspective of somebody looking at me being like, can this guy just shut the fuck up? Because I literally sitting there, I was like, I think I'm going to go and talk to them, I think, because like, why is no one concerned about this? It's not playing. Like there's sound. We should be seeing something. And the guy next to me just leans in. He's like, it's an old movie, man. This is how old movies open. And I was like, oh, okay. Sorry. Wild then. Well, the cinema was
really
mostly...
actually...
Yeah. He truly did it, actually to you.
And, like, the whole time I was watching it, I could just kind of, like, feel his, like, energy, if that makes sense. It's, like, the bit of autism a bit, where I was like, I can't break off from the fact that, like, this person's just, like, been like, you're a dickhead. But anyway, I just tried to watch the movie, and then the intermission comes in, and when I come back from the intermission, he'd, like, moved over a couple of seats, and I was like, oh, yeah. Okay. Did I ruin your experience that much?
Man.
Jesus. But yeah, so
yes,
that was wild.
The answer is yes.
Leaving the film though, I think that I left and I was a little mixed on it. I think I kind of left with the mentality of, I understand why people like this a lot. I see the appeal, but for me, it felt like, I think the word that I used to explain to my friend, and I think to you as well, Kay, was just like, this is just like, it feels gratuitous. It's just like at a certain point, just, I get it, okay? You're a master. I don't, why? It felt like I'd been in the theater for 4 hours. And even 2 days ago, Kay, we were talking about, I was like, man, I'm like ramping my brain up to watch this again. I think I'm going to have a good time, but I'm trying to wrap my head around sitting down for like 3.5 hours to watch this. And then I go and check the runtime. I'm like, 2.5 hours? Did I watch an extended cut or something? And then I watched it and I was like, no, it wasn't that at all. But it was interesting leaving for the first time. And it wasn't until the next couple of days, this was like a work colleague that I watched it with, that we were texting about it. And he really loves these like Lovecraftian kind of stories. And he was talking about that quite a bit. And yeah, Kenny says outdated. It feels outdated, which we will touch on in a bit. But it was in talking about it more that I was
I
like,
may not agree.
It grew on me a bit. And then I still was like, okay, like I see it now. I don't really need to watch it again. I'm fine. But I was really excited when Kay hadn't seen it before and we were getting ready to do it for the podcast because I thought, this is great. Actually, the second that he told me you were going to do it, IMAX Film Festival was playing again, so I was like, I'm gonna go watch it in IMAX again.
I was so mad.
I ended up being sick that day, so I couldn't.
This motherfucker has seen so many incredible classic films on that goddamn the second largest screen in the world.
Just when we timed your visit out here,
so pissed, Parks. You don't understand, because I'm like, he saw Jaws and E.T. for the first time on that screen, and I'm like, fuck you, man. I had to be just traumatized as a child. Like,
I watched Rogue One on that screen when they did the re-release, and then I got to watch that clip from Andor that they showed with Rogue One. I got to see that on IMAX. I was like, oh, this is delicious. They actually
Andor crumbs on an IMAX screen.
Yeah, I didn't actually get to I didn't get into this one, but they also did an Obi-Wan screening of the first.
Oh, too bad, so sad. So anyway, no.
But yeah. So that it was sick, and so my second viewing happened at home in the comfort of my room, which I've actually been watching a lot more movies in my bedroom recently. So I've been upgrading the space in there. So I did put the TV up on the wall.
Oh yeah.
I got a much bigger TV, and I got a nice sound setup in there now as well. So the same setup that I have in my like theater room in my house, I essentially have in my bedroom too. So
there you go.
It's not all that bad. And so I had a great time that next time around. So I'm really keen to talk about how that kind of developed too. But Kay, your experience with this film thus far, I know there's a lot of talk about this film in your life up until now, a lot of conversation that has happened around it, and a lot of, like you said, with film school, it probably was around quite a bit. So I'm wondering, before you actually just talk about your first watch experience too, do you reckon you could talk to some of your feelings about the film before you watched it? And then obviously we'll get into how it changed in the discussion.
So unfortunately, this is one of those films, because here's the thing about film school, to those who haven't attended. A lot of it is mansplaining film history to you, and why things that your professors saw as kids should still be the standard. And for that, there is a beauty to that to some degree. Like, I love when people are passionate about their films, but the issue is there is a certain generation that believes that, and it's always funny because it always updates, right? Like, for when Spielberg and Scorsese and those people were going to school, it was the films of the 50s, it was the films of this, and it was like, oh, that was true cinema. But then you move on and it's like, okay, well, now true cinema, but it's like, it kept feeling like I would hear people talk about 2001 and they were either hipster white guys with A24 hats who are like, it's symbolic, man, it's like a metaphor, and I'm like, fuck you, it's not well told. And it's like,
if I flip this hat inside out, it has an A24 logo on it.
I was gonna say, like, I
God
really
damn it, Marks.
I found
I have fallen.
I actually really want the A24 hat, and I actually found one, like a letterbox hat as well, that just has the 3 little circles on there, that I was like, that's cute. I kind of
You're
want
what's
that.
wrong with humanity.
What do you mean?
And so
you and I both know that's not true. How dare you?
We both know. But no, it's tough because, like, there are people that just, like, there's a vibe to it. Like, there are people that genuinely, I love letterbox, and I love all those A24. Obviously, it's an gross over exaggeration and oversimplification, but it's mainly, there's a lot of people that kind of gatekeep the film community, and a lot of people use stuff like, even unfortunately Chris Nolan is one of these, he's one of these people. It's a lot of people that are the Nolan heads are also the Nolan bros are a very good example of this, of people. And for a while, I just didn't know if 2001: A Space Odyssey was being kept in the conversation because everybody thought it should be. Like, it's one of those films that's like, it goes away and it's like, everybody's like, oh man, 2001, but you watch it again, it's like, oh, but for the time.
Yeah.
And it's
like it's famous for being famous in a way to now.
Like, I felt the same way about Casablanca until I saw it, and then it was like, oh my God, no, this film is objectively still brilliant.
I need to see still as well. But like, Kay, it's really interesting that point that you mentioned, because I feel like sometimes people like something because they feel like they have to.
Exactly.
And that's the difficulty, is when you watch something like this with someone and they can explain to you why they like it versus, oh, you just don't get it, man. It's just, it's bigger than this. It's like, I understand everything's open to like interpretation, but I feel like you can kind of tell the people that are watching this because they feel like they have to. versus
Right.
others. Like
Yeah.
and I think also recently on TikTok, there's been a couple of things that I've seen pop up, which is with Letterboxd blowing up on TikTok right now and seeing all of these. That's some of my favorite videos because everybody knows Letterboxd's like 4 favorites, but they go to the red carpet now and they ask the people that are part of the film,
4 favorites.
what are your 4
Those are
favorites?
great, yeah.
And I love those videos. I save them all the time. I save the videos that people watch. But then I've been seeing recently people being like, oh, I'm sick and tired of people like gatekeeping. Like, I don't want to watch this old like French film from 1940 called like Je m'appelle Maha. And I'm like, I think I can understand everyone's mentality on it a little bit, but it feels like, as with everything on the internet, it's always like ride or die. There's no kind of like middle ground. It's like, I can understand that when you look at Emma Stone's 4 favorites and you go, what the hell are those 4 films? But one part is I'm interested in why, and I want to see all 4 of her favorite films. And then, you know, the other part of the internet is just like, oh, she's just being like elitist and stuff. It's like, no, like people's favorites are their favorites.
Those
like,
mean something to them.
I did see something.
And that way of thinking is kind of like upheld by, like, it's kind of like the flip side of that sort of thing from film school you describe, where it's like there's like a cultural sort of I don't know, snobbery about you have to like this or you have to view this a certain way. That being enforced long enough, or that sort of notion catching on long enough, you know, on the other side, to people who don't understand it go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not smart enough to you know, watch that or enjoy that. And it's like, no, dude, this is a film. It can be like, if you can watch it, like, it's just out there, you know, remove it from all the context. Like, you know, have your own opinion about it.
Yeah. And that to go with my feeling on all of this, that was what I kind of felt was lacking about 2001. And it felt like too sacred of a film that a lot of people had very passionate feelings about.
Right.
But it felt like I couldn't decipher whether or not it was a genuine feeling about it, or if it was something that was less, for lack of a better phrase, less sincere. Yeah. And it was like, and that was why when you and I were going back and forth about films that we could do, I mentioned like I hadn't seen 2001 and you were doing there. And I was like, well, this is honestly the best context that I would want to watch the film in, because it's the most honest discussion that I've wanted to foster about films like this for so long. And I'm really glad I watched it under those circumstances, because it was, so that was kind of all. And then I've watched it over the past 2 days, because I'll tell you what, I watch it after a long day of work and I sit down and some of those shots are so long.
Yes.
That it gets, and it's a very quiet movie. So it kind of lulls you. Yeah. I like, and not to the film's fault, I fell asleep like 3 times and it was like, but it was just like a lullaby.
I totally
like
get
one of those beautiful screensavers that you watch and you're like, wow.
Yes.
And then you're just like, I swear to God, I was watching sometimes I'll like listen to stuff on my way down to work, because I have to go in and walk all the way down to where I have to actually work. And but at that time you're kind of walking the floor, so you're not really allowed to have your phone out. So I just put my long hair down and put my earbuds in. And there was one sequence where I literally heard silence for 5 minutes. and then I heard a beep, beep, beep. And I just went in my head and I went, what the fuck is happening? And then I literally had to get to where I was going, went to the bathroom, like went back and watched it, and I was horrified. But like, so this is one of the coolest, weirdest experiences I've had watching a movie. That's but nonetheless, going forward, now let's launch into the spoilers of everything there. But for those of the uninitiated and those who are just joining us first time, we don't go through the movie beat for beat, but obviously we're going to get into topics that are spoilers, and we don't want to feel hindered by that. So if you are interested in watching this spoiler free, just save this, come back to it. But I think that you'll have a really good time. And if you are like me and needed a reason to watch this movie from people that don't necessarily like worship at its feet, that want to have a little bit of a interesting conversation around that there, I think this is a very productive way to then determine if you want to watch it yourself. Yeah. But regardless, consider this your spoiler warning from here on out. Wow. So here we go. So going with that, Naf, obviously this movie's very odd.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the weirdest structured movies I've seen in a long time.
Yeah. It's in the video that I was talking about earlier, which again you guys can just watch on YouTube, and I definitely recommend. I'm going to finish it after we finish this episode too. But they talk about how Kubrick was saying that he wanted to, and even like till a few years before he passed away, he was talking about how he wanted to like essentially break the conventions again. He wanted to break the mold. He wanted to be on the cutting edge, and they were telling him, late in his life, like you kind of already did it with 2001, and he wanted to do it again. And I'm not sure where that ended because obviously I haven't finished the documentary yet. But you can really see that there's a couple of things that come up here, right? One is for the time, it was very common for films to open with opening credits and show who's playing what and whatever. That was the draw into the film. It was you go in, you sit down, and then you know who's in it, what's going on, and all of that jazz. And that was very commonplace. And when this film came out, it opened as, they mention it in the documentary, it's a silent film in the sound era, technically. Because when you think about it, there isn't one word of dialogue until 32 minutes into the film. It's all music and sound. So like not silent in terms of silent, but like
sure,
for the time, you had silent films, and then you had films that people didn't shut up about, or didn't shut up in, sorry. And then all of a sudden...
the film bros of that time.
Yeah, people were just like, what is going on? And people were walking out of the film. You see this everywhere. People were like, what the hell? And
I came for the space movie and I got monkeys. What's going on?
Yeah.
Did I get in the wrong theater, man? Like, is it like...
They talk about as well how like the science fiction of that generation, Kubrick kind of abhorred it too. He was like, this isn't cinema. This is rubbish.
That definitely shows.
Yeah, and you can see that even now you can see how the film has influenced films that have come out as recently as a month ago, in brilliant ways. But I think that's one of the things that blew my mind too. You've got these sort of, it's in 3 sections, but it's not necessarily in like 3 acts. Like the 3-act structure of that era isn't a thing in this film at all. And when we talk about the structure, generally we're familiar with having characters introduced and seeing each of them have these kind of arcs. You obviously got the structure of like the story too and what's happening there. And I mean, when you break down the story here, it's like, okay, you have the intro, which is nothing. You have the first part that kind of takes you from the space station to the monolith, and then we go 18 months later, and the movie genuinely kind of starts in that like 18 months later section, which is...
You're about an hour in at that point.
Like you're an hour 10 into the film before the film starts. Up until then, you're just kind of like, what the hell is happening? I have no idea. And
well, a spaceship is moving through space, Naff. That's what's happening.
Yeah. Well, even then, you don't know the monolith.
Take 10 minutes.
Yeah, true. Well, everything takes forever to move. Yeah. I would say even then, you don't even know the monolith connection to the ship until like towards the end of like the ship part. So
it's like near the end of the film, actually, in rewatch. I was like, oh, I thought there was a lot more gap between Hal being switched off and the Stargate seeking, but it's like not at all. It's like there.
It's right before, they go there. Yeah. So you're kind of really thrown for a loop with that first tower if you're trying to follow plot,
Yeah. And
I was one of those people thrown for a loop for the first hour.
I think particularly with how characters are presented in the film, it's very different than what you experience in a film these days, or at all. Oh, Kari just joined the TikTok. Hi, Kari. But yeah, so Parks, I know that you mentioned that it was something you wanted to talk about a little bit too, but like around the actual characters in this film and how they're presented to us, it's very different than what you'd see in something today.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I think, there's been pretty big shifts in like popular filmmaking over the last several decades that have kind of like enforced the importance of having a character. And I mean, that's there at the beginning of cinema too, like the importance of a central character the audience needs to follow. And, these are things that any studio, if you're, giving them a movie, they'd be like, like, before you make this thing, like, who's the character? Okay, is this a character the audience will want to follow? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and this film has characters and they have names and they do make choices that sort of tell you who they are. You know, they have reactions that tell you who you are. So there is characterization as far as that goes. But you make this thing. I think one of the bolder, I mean, it's hard to define the boldest thing in this film, I have to say. One of the bolder creative choices in the film, I feel like, is, you know, through just how the characters are portrayed and treated, never making them like the emphasis of what you're watching. This is a space odyssey, and in a sense, the human characters are like insignificant compared to greater forces acting on them. You know, you have the monolith being one of those things that's part of that, and then Hal, you know, being like an artificial intelligence, and he's a character too, you could say, but also, you know, you could argue represents like an oppositional like force.
Sure. Yeah.
And then of course all the, you know, the crazy bullshit at the end, you know, with the Stargate sequence and all that. So in a sense, you know, you talk about breaking the mold, like that is one of the core ways the movie breaks the mold, like resisting this facet of just filmmaking in general. Like, hey, have a character that goes on a journey that you can follow. They go on a journey through several different characters, but they're utterly insignificant in like the grander thing.
It's I think as you're talking about like the insignificance as like a key word is something that this film very much presents us with. It's like sometimes things again don't need explanation, or they don't have an explanation. It's not up to us to understand. Like your kind of position within this is just it's insignificant.
Right.
It's like it's just peering into the world a little bit, almost like in a documentary sense. And I guess watching this film and also this happening,
I wrote down that word when I was watching. I wrote down documentary because it does feel like that at times.
It's crazy, and it's like I understand also why people think that Kubrick directed the moon landing to a certain point. I'm like, you see this
for sure,
and then you see that, and you're kind of like, if somebody explaining that happened in 1969, the film came out in 1968, that if somebody wanted to fake it, like you have everything you need, and there are still shots in there that watching it last night, I have no idea how they put pieces together. There are some VFX breakdowns. I think Corridor Crew did one where they talked about some bits, and it's so clever what they've done. And at the same time, I'm going, I see also what you've done. You've split the screen in half, but I'm also going for the time and not having a computer. I'm like, on Premiere, I can stitch two shots together, and I could stitch something that I filmed horizontally and have Kay walking on the wall and then put a little bar in the middle, and he walks behind the bar, and then it's a top-down shot next to it. That I can do that in 2 minutes on Premiere. But like back here, and I've watched like, you know, things like, for example, like in Fablemans was something that I really loved about it, where they showed how you would edit back in the day, this little editing bay. Like I know they had something like that on steroids in the studios, but I still look at that and I go,
oh yeah,
what? How? It's
like looking at old. It's like looking at old rear projection or matte paintings and seeing how like set extensions done with like models. Like you look at like Raiders. I remember Allie and I got to go to the Academy and they had like Ben Burt and a lot of like the guys who worked on Raiders, and they did a whole presentation before they showed the film in like a 70mm print or something. And they were talking about it. And you saw, you know, like literally just like a plexiglass, you know, thing with the like it drawn on and then just playing the footage there. And I'm just like, I know that's how it's done, like NAF, but it's like a part of me didn't compute that is how, like, you know, it's like I know that that's how it was done, but it's weird when you actually see it.
Absolutely. It almost like brings it down to earth in like a really disarming way, where you're like, oh, it's that like cobbled together, you know, like, but at the same time, it underlines the brilliance of like, how did they make that work and how did they think of that? Like,
I think it's exactly. I think it's that kind of moment when you look at it, it feels cobbled together for us now, but at the same time, you're also like, oh, but as Naf, you're saying they didn't have like a computer in Premiere and it was easy to, it's like, to me, I'm like, okay, yeah, getting the pieces, I can see it, but it's the fact that at the day
Yeah.
you stitch them together. Like now I can see how you did that in an instant, but then it's like, oh shit, no, this actually took a lot of fucking engineering to get this right.
It's insane. And I think particularly the fact that the craft of the film, I'm sure we'll dive in a little bit more into like the craft specifically in a moment too, but like going back to the point around like the characters and how there is this sense of like insignificance, that we're just kind of there, we're just kind of seeing this documentary. I like how and I can't imagine how it would have been at the time, but I like how the film just assumes everything is fact and doesn't over explain things to you, which is something that is slowly coming back into films now and is very common in those, your sort of A24 type films, but you kind of miss it in the big releases of the year, your MCUs and your Star Warses of it all. Like I obviously want Star Wars to be a lot deeper than that too, but there are instances in which things are just kind of just over explained, or there's the fear that you won't get it, and we want to get the mass audience, everyone needs to understand, and it just feels just so over explained. And it's again comparing like a Rise of Skywalker to like Andor, and Andor just being like, it doesn't sit there and break everything. It's like it doesn't go, this is the politics room where all the politics go down. It just happens. And there is I think a deep distrust in the studios in our ability to understand what they're presenting to us. And I think slowly that's coming around a bit with, obviously TV's doing it, been doing it for a while and doing it a lot better over time. But with films, we're seeing more stuff come out that is a bit closer to this. But I can't imagine sitting there in 1968 wondering, what the hell am I watching? What's going on? And just seeing all of this stuff that just, I think outside of one shot where Kubrick does a push in on the instructions for the anti-gravity toilet, which doesn't even hang that long, I don't think there's any sense of explaining what's happening there. It just happens. So,
absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of creative choices that, the word gratuitous was brought up earlier, and I won't argue against that, like absolutely, but at the same time, there's something like minimalistic about creative choices in this film, where Kubrick only ever cuts when he absolutely needs to. Characters will be
underrated.
Oh, absolutely. Well, underrated, and I wouldn't say overrated. I would say properly respected, because one of the most famous edits of all time is, at the end of the Dawn of Man's, the match cut
bone.
There. Right. But it's just amazing, because, when you're operating on that kind of level of like, I'm only cutting when I absolutely need to, and you have all these, very well constructed, sort of deliberately sort of set up shots. It's like, you're placing, like you said, you're placing a lot of faith in the audience to sort of just follow along, notice what they need to notice. And I guess in that way, you're conditioned kind of, by the time you get to like the Jupiter mission, you're kind of conditioned to understand every shot is telling you something. Yeah. And you spend so much time looking at it, you're going to kind of absorb everything that you're like, okay, what's significant here? What am I being communicated right now?
Yeah.
And like one of my favorite. Oh,
I'll touch on this point quickly, Kay, and we'll come to yours as well, because when you look at the discussion about the film too, it's like the creators kind of reveled in the fact that they confused people. They would actually say, people would ask, what does it mean? And, Arthur C. Clarke is on record saying, if you leave and you understand it entirely, then we fucked up. It's that simple.
Amazing.
It's just...
That's crazy. Yeah. If someone watched one of my videos and they were confused, I have failed. That's how I feel.
That's how I feel too.
Yeah.
It's like...
Which is why... never mind. That's a different diatribe. We don't have time.
Like a big dick moment to just be like... I think that's what I felt leaving the first time, where I was like, okay, I get it. Mr. Kubrick, it's huge. All right. Thank you for showing me how huge it is. Congratulations. That's how I felt kind of leaving the first time. It wasn't until sitting with it and talking about it with a friend, which I think also is key to your enjoyment of this film a bit. I think, like, you were talking about your experience too, Parks, around like there was somebody else there that you got to discuss a little bit with, and that little moment afterwards, I feel like potentially had that not happened, while you would still have been blown away by the film, maybe the experience leaving it doesn't kind of hold as special a place. Potentially. I mean, feel free to disagree too, but
no, I agree with that. Yeah,
I think that had I gone and watched this film by myself and left and had the experience that I had there, I would have just been like, yeah, it's a film bro movie, whatever. And I kind of did have that a little bit. When I went back and re-reviewed it on Letterboxd last night, I gave it 4 stars beforehand, and I hadn't hit like on it. And I was talking to Kay just before. I was like, I could have sworn I reviewed it, but I guess I didn't, because I remember explicitly being like, it feels, like gratuitous and over the top. And at a certain point, I'm just like, I get that you're trying to be realistic, but is realistic? It's like I saw an episode of
style over substance, potentially.
Yeah, I saw an episode of Top Gear once, where they were invited to consult on a film. Imagine that. But they were invited to consult on a film, and the director was like doing a car chase sequence, and they literally were like, "Oh, dude, I don't know how to tell you this, but like, this car can't drift unless you turn off the traction control, which you can only do if you press the button for 3 seconds while you're in park." And so they reshoot the film with the actors and add in somebody being like, all right, we got to get around this corner quickly. And he's like, okay, I'm going to quickly just press the traction control button off for 3 seconds and then shift into manual so that we can do it. And it just, ruins the flow. It's like, you can see that here. It's so realistic for something they hadn't even experienced yet, that you could argue, does it need to be? Did it need to be that slow? And my first watch, my answer to that would be very different from my second watch. But sorry to jump off on a tangent, Kay. You had a point you wanted to talk to.
Well, I guess going off of what you're saying about like style over substance, because coming at this from a person who, again, in all honesty, I was trying to watch the film earnestly, but it's hard not to go into this film with my own little bit of, okay, it's kind of like when somebody says in like a comedy show, goes like, oh, this is the funniest comedian you've ever heard. These jokes, you're gonna die. You immediately go, oh, really? Okay.
And someone goes,
well, then it better hold up.
The plot twist, and then you go, I guess the plot.
Exactly. And you're like, is it this? And you're like, yep, got it. But
it was predictable, that sort of thing.
But yeah, but to me, it was one of those things of not knowing a lot of that going into it. And one of the things I really did admire was the slow, methodical nature of the film. Like, obviously, and that's why even I won't hold it against it to the point of like me like nodding off a little. Like, to me, I would have said like there's stuff I like. Allie and I were talking about this, and Allie says, I feel like 2001 is the cut of Star Wars that George Lucas would have wanted if Marsha Lucas hadn't been there.
Wow.
And
wow. That's a really insightful sort of perspective. Wow.
And it's that thing of going, okay, you're spending a lot of time on the model when you don't have the energy. And you look at the difference between, and that was also what made me start to appreciate why I felt that people felt so revolutionized by Star Wars, because if this was your standard of sci-fi, it's very slow, it's very deliberate, to then contrast that with the trench run.
2001 on crack.
Exactly. It's 2001 with a little pep in its step. Like you gave it like a cup of coffee faster, and said, go on. It's truly. And it was that thing of going with the truly George Lucas adage there. But the thing, what I liked about it was in contrast to that, and especially nowadays when films are not slow and deliberate and they would rather be faster. I do feel I watched Lawrence of Arabia not terribly long ago as well. And that was a similar feeling of great movie, but having the whole thing. And also shout out to Diet in the Force who just entered the chat. And you are correct. A little pep in the chat. But the whole thing is that I felt that there is a slowness to these older films. And yes, is that a little dated? Would I go as long with this stuff? No, I still would advise you can trim and still get the same effect, but it's undeniable that it builds a certain feeling, and it's undeniable that feeling is effective. Like, one of my favorite sequences in the film is the Hal killing the crew. And that
was the part you listened to where it's just like 5 minutes of silence followed by beeping, right? Yeah.
And it turned into my favorite thing in the film, because I love shit like that. I love films that I can't radio listen to. And I think that's my favorite thing there with it. And that's what I absolutely love about what this film does. And going to that, Parks, like, I think that what I feel is it was the sound design for me that really got me. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, as well as, you know, some of the visuals. But as we get into kind of the making of, I feel like a lot of what this film really has to offer and why it stays as relevant as it does is a part of is undeniably, again, as we talked about, may not be the characters, it may not be the plot, but it is how this story is told. It's the cleverness in the execution, not in necessarily how it's full on written.
Yeah, like how it kind of comes together as a whole. Yeah, like the sum of all of its parts. But it's a good point to kind of like transition into that kind of making of section as well. I know it's pretty easy to talk about the visuals quite a bit, but the sound in particular, I know Kay was something you wanted to talk about, which I definitely want to dive into because it's interesting.
But yes, but absolutely. But let's start off with those visuals.
Yeah. But any aspect of the kind of craft that you want to touch on first, Parks, would be awesome as well. Like I think sound visuals is cool, but anything else that sticks out to you?
I mean, in terms of crafts, like I know one thing that always sort of blows me away to learn about is like the use of front screen projection for the Dawn of Man sequence at the start of the film, which I don't know I don't know too much about the history of like that technology in particular, but it you know, you see stuff today like stagecraft, like the volume, you know, used for a lot of like the Star Wars shows and Disney productions, and that is essentially, you know, you kind of trace like the sort of function of that technology, you know, all the way back to like front screen projection. And as you mentioned, like, you know, Kubrick wasn't too keen on like blue screen, green screen, anything like that. And it's just amazing because you wouldn't even be able to tell watching the start of the movie that a lot of the background shots you're seeing are I do not remember like the region
rear projection, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's front screen projection is what.
Oh,
it's
sorry,
called,
yes.
Yeah, but so it's just I'm always mesmerized by that, just the invisible effects of this movie, and it truly does feel like some stuff like is Kubrick launched a camera into space. But other than that, you know, I there's a lot of the sort of craft of this film that I don't know too much about, actually. So it'd be fun to learn anything about that.
Yeah, it's like interesting that particularly when you look at like the first shot we get of the Discovery one is like exactly what Lucas did in Star Wars just a few years later with the opening shot. It's like it's the same. It's so cool that you can see how he would have taken this idea and gone, how did he do it? He's used miniatures. That's how I want to do it. And they've just kind of reverse engineered it to become, you know, Star Wars later. I thought that in itself was amazing. And there are some bits where now when you watch, it can kind of feel like it's a PNG that they're just like squishing down into the corner because the actual, what's the word? Like you don't get kind of as much of the parallax that you get when it's like really, really in the edge of that screen. So you can see those little bits where it's a little bit like dated, I think. But
yeah,
I suppose that if you're just watching it from the visual perspective, you don't look at that stuff. I find for me, in wanting to watch a lot more films this year and last year, it's from the perspective of wanting to learn more and eventually, you know, start to make some stuff. And so like things like a really good edit, I'm looking for it, and I'm looking for how are they making this work. And there's a couple of little bits there, but then I found that it almost teases me in a bit where there are moments where it looks like a little miniature that's just being a PNG that's being squished on screen and heading towards the corner, and then it cuts to this like huge shot that I'm like, hold on, like if you did it here, how come you didn't do it there? It's almost like I go, yes, it is an old film for about 10 seconds. And then it comes back to going, I have no idea how they did this. Like they've got this lunar module floating over the screen, and they've been so smart as to even light it from below because the sun hits the moon and reflects light back upwards. And they've lit the miniature from beneath, which they hadn't even been on the moon at that point. So how did you know to reflect the light off the moon back up? And Then it comes down to
I was going to bring that up later. Yeah.
Like, there are so many little. It's actually, I think Kenny said it there before. Like the devil is in the details in this film. It is when you start trying to pick it apart, and you look at that first shot of the ship docking that looks like it's docking into the Death Star, and you can see people in the corners and on the roof. That again in Premiere today, mask and comp, just it's right there. You know, shots like the FaceTime call with his daughter, which actually learnt in the fun facts was actually Kubrick's daughter as well, who plays the
I saw that as well. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Gotta love that.
Yeah, like there are all these little moments that you just like your eyes drawn to that you go, if you look at it deep enough, yeah, you can kind of see how when it was comped, it's a little bit off. But like
it's amazing.
Oh my God.
I mean, I feel like this movie has aged, I would almost say, like much better than the first Star Wars movie, despite the fact Star Wars came out, you know, what, almost a decade later?
Yeah. Agreed.
So it like that's Kubrick's perfectionism, you know, it's like insane.
Just shout out another like previous guest on the show as well. Who was it? So Jim. So Nalbus came on and did the movie House with us. But for 2001, I actually was looking at his review earlier this morning, and one of the notes, it says at the bottom, plus it looks like it was made fucking yesterday. It looks like it was shot in space. I don't know how they did it. It puts so much modern stuff to shame. And it's funny that I was thinking about, it's a similar feeling to when we watched Rear Window, okay, where I kind of anticipated that Rear Window would feel old, but there are so many things that you watch and you go, that's something they do today. And you can kind of tell you've got all these static shots that even though the subject matter is futuristic, it feels old, you know, just because of the nature of the dialogue and how these people, it's very stiff, you know.
There's a certain beautiful.
Then you have these moments where, like, for example, as we're walking down towards the monolith on the moon, where they move to a handheld shot. And if that shot was cut and put in like Dune, I wouldn't give it a second thought. It genuinely looks that good.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. Outside of, you know, the little things that they didn't know what a spacesuit was going to look like, so like they look a little silly these days, but still the contrast of like the white background with the red suit, there are those key moments in the film that stand out as some of the best cinematography I've seen in my life.
You can't beat good composition and good lighting. It's timeless. You know?
My God. Yeah. Well, and then to add on to that, production design, like the style of everything, the actual craft of the spaceships, like even if it was one of those things where I was blown away when I looked that up, because I didn't realize that this was before we actually went to the moon, that this was before like a lot of this stuff had actually been established in life, which I'll talk about later as a thing that a question that this film poses, which is in history, is this film to thank for a lot of that shit? Is this film like not like in a
art imitates film, reality, imitates art, that type of thing?
But it's that idea of it. It inspires people to do the real thing.
Yeah.
And what I love about this film is it makes you really feel it. Like I have a deep phobia of space. As much as I love Star Wars, I have a deep the same way people have like phobia of deep undersea, I have of space.
Right.
Because I'm like, everybody's like, oh, I want to go to space. That sounds cool. Fuck no. You know what happens if you go over there? You've seen submarines implode. Yeah, but that's in space. And it's like, at least in like, you know, you can get the submarine to go up to the surface. Nah, man, you're out there. Like, and even when you get to where you're going, fuck that shit. You can't breathe there either. And it's like, you know, my feeling on this matter is very particular, but like I have a deep phobia of this shit, and this movie did not help. But it did make me go, see, this is why we shouldn't be there, and just go like. And so
it's really interesting that like how some of those scenes are shot too, with particularly when who is it? It's the co-pilot when he's kind of exploded out. I thought that part still in both
Frank.
watches stands out to me as interesting choices in the edit in particular. And I'd love to know, I want to know your thoughts on that first, Parks, actually. And then I want to get your thoughts too, Kay, because both times, that's one that stands out to, as we were saying before, while the edit is, and I think to your point before, Parks, like, yeah, definitely like well respected. And when I said kind of like underrated before, I suppose meant I don't hear enough people talk about it. But I think that there are key parts in this film where it feels invisible and you'd forget you're watching a film. And again, in the IMAX experience where all of it's in all your peripherals, it's easy.
Oh yeah.
That moment stands out to me as the one moment where I go, oh yeah, I'm watching a movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say that's for me, that's one of two moments. The first moment in the movie is in the Dawn of Man sequence when you know, they've interacted with the monolith. You know, that whole thing has happened. And now they're off, like, you know, the one monkey is playing with the bone. And then there's that shot, that quick shot back to the monolith. It's a frame you already saw, but you're seeing it now minutes later. And right after it, the monkey pauses and it's like, oh, and I, that is one of my favorite cuts I've ever seen in a movie. It's a cut. I'm like, anything I ever make, any of my videos, I'm like, if I can cut to something to reflect a character thinking about something, I'm going to put that in. And I feel like I see that with movies now. I feel like that's something Nolan does. I know it's like in Oppenheimer, that's like a kind of cut you see a lot whenever they mention a character's name and boom, you know, there's that person on the screen for like 2 seconds. But love that. And then, yeah, like a very similar, well, not exactly, well, kind of similar in the sense that it's a quick cut, but or rather a series of quick cuts, like right before Frank gets ejected from the pod. You have three, you could not, there's no better word to describe it other than three violent cuts on just like Hal, boom, boom, boom.
Oh,
and then,
yeah.
And I when I was watching it last night, you know, you don't have the luxury of this when you're seeing it in the theater, which might, you know, be better in its own way. But, well, for sure. I mean, that's probably how it was originally intended. You know, you can't just pause and rewind, you know, when Kubrick showed this in 1968. But watching it last night, I literally, after it happened, I paused and had to and rewinded it because I was like, wait, whoa, what the fuck? Like, I was like, I for some reason I forgot about this moment, and it just, I don't know, it shocked the hell out of me, which is, you know, the intent. Like it's extremely effective, especially in a movie where the average shot probably runs for like 30 seconds,
30 minutes.
You know, or longer. Or 30 minutes. You know, the film is 5 shots. That's it.
I mean, truly, but that's like, that was the thing that I was thinking to myself, because I was like, yes, like, am I going to kind of also chalk this up to old filmmaking that kind of liked the grandeur of it, especially when you do something like this, where you want the big experience. Like I have a feeling that's where modern day film experiences are going to go, is if it continues this way of like very big budget films and then small films. I feel like we're almost going to get a repeat of this, of stuff that is meant to be an epic that you don't want to see on a screen, like a Dune or things there.
Yeah.
But just to finish up this point, my feeling with this was that moment of when you're talking about the edit, Kubrick has lulled you into a false sense. At first I was like, oh, well, that's just how this is edited. It's a false sense of security.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it is going because as soon as it comes in, he's like, bam, 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 like going to give you those moments. And then what's brilliant is then he almost takes a horror director approach to it and goes, oh, so you think that you're safe now that I'm not doing cuts? Watch this life support system slowly fail. And there's no fighting. You're not seeing this person fighting against, you know,
powerless.
Like, you know, it's just, they're dead.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? It's kind of just that feeling of
quickly either. Like it's
a bit
out.
But it's just such a really cool idea of how he does it. And again, it makes you question everything. And then by the time you get to the end of the film, you're like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to expect? What the fuck am I supposed to be? We're get to this point and I'm like, I gotta pay attention because I don't know when he's gonna pull the rug out from under me. I don't even know what the fuck is happening.
Yeah.
And it's like,
well, one of the key points you thought were like, so you want to talk about like how he builds terror in the sound design in particular. And I think it's really interesting how it's done on kind of both sides. Because one is, you've got these random beeps and like, for example, the first monolith touch and then like by the human, and then the sound, and then it just cuts to 18 months later, and you're like, hold on, what? Like,
what happened to those guys?
Yeah. And then Which if you watch the sequel, you'll know. But the other one was
finally.
in how it uses its silence. And
Yes.
silence, and then also things like what's it called? Like the Commander Bowman or Captain Bowman, breathing while he's doing
Dave.
Dave Bowman. Just
Yeah.
the breathing, which is so.
Yeah.
It's a lot, you know. And when you're watching it, I think that was one of the points the first time watching it where I was just like, okay, I get it, because it's a long sequence. And
right.
Then again, in the second watch, it's a bit more like, I know where this is going, so it's okay. But that was really interesting, and it's okay. Like, what other moments stand out to you as?
Well, you nailed it. Like the Dave Bowman moment of just him, like, yep. And so, Bone Man. But like the thing is, this guy having that moment of. It's also very interesting how the beginning and the second, like, or I guess so after Dawn of Man, that second part leading to the monolith and then the Jupiter, it's really interesting between the two of those, because the first one is kind of making space travel feel like commercial air flight travel.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's such a, and then the music is very classical. It's you don't get a shit ton of silence. You get a lot of beautiful music and kind of these, like, here's the beauty of space, here's what we could have,
here's space utopia, you know.
Exactly, like plenty of room, all of this, and it's like, oh, here's people that bring this stuff to you. Even when they go to the moon, they're on that little like rover, and it's like, oh, I got these boxes, you want chicken or ham? And I was so brilliant because it's also so inane. It's something that immediately grounds the audience in a reality of like, oh, it's food. It's that moment of like, okay, we all are with you. Like we've seen this kind of scene, you know.
And I was gonna say, with like the space flight too, before that, the fact that he's the only person on the flight, and you'd have to think how amazing space flight must seem to the audience of like the 1960s, where they're like, dude, if this was real now, we'd be going to the moon 24/7, you know. But there's only just
it's
one
still
guy.
Amazing to me now.
Right. Yeah. And I guess it all really sells that that silent film sort of argument from before, where, you know, a silent film like doesn't have dialogue but had music. Like, for a lot of that, the music is the storytelling. And along with the visuals, of course. But
cheeky.
And for sure, like with the minimalism I mentioned earlier too, I would say very much applies to the sound, where it's like, I'm going to have like a very powerful sound that you're going to build such a strong association with, that when you hear it later in the film, you know, it's going to really get under your skin, like in an effective way. And, you know, with the monolith being probably the most, you know, sort of prominent example of that. Like, once it's the first time you hear it, it's like, it's eerie, it's terrifying, it's fascinating. And then when you hear it again, it's like, but now you see people that you know and understand interacting with it. It's like, oh God, it's like even more tense now, you know? So it's like magic, you know?
It truly is. And the other moment that I really wanted to touch on was the concept of, but then you cut to the Hal stuff, and with that one being contrasted with so much silence.
Right.
And it is almost like when you get into the dialogue of it all, even that is so interesting, because the dialogue, I was noticing, everything is always very calm, very soft, very deliberate. Like, even them talking to each other, you're not hearing them go, ha ha ha, how you doing? Like, you know, you're not hearing that kind of boisterous nature to it. It's open the pod bay doors, Hal.
We'll get into it later, but there's an argument to be made that Hal is a little more expressive than the people in this movie.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Like,
the way he talks at points. Yeah.
On the music section as well, like, one of the other things that I saw while I was putting together my fun facts is that the composer, whose name I will mess up, his name was Giorgi Ligeti. He actually sued over the unauthorized use of his music in the film.
No way.
And they cut up one of his pieces called Adventures to use for sections in the film. Yeah, he didn't have the rights to it. It says, Kubrick's decision to use classical music for his score would cost him. Contemporary composer Giorgi sued over the unauthorized use of his music and the cutting of his piece Adventures.
That sounds like Kubrick, though.
Kubrick was the first YouTuber. He really was. He was.
Like,
He was out here
so we
saying,
demonetized
"I'm just gonna
this.
take
Sorry,
this
guys."
song and put it on my demonetized again." No.
Yeah, but he's like, demonetized? What? I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. And it's just like,
you're limiting my creative freedom, man. Like, let me use it.
Come on, man.
There was
like...
2 other things just on the topic of the craft too, because then we'll probably like move into some of the other things we wanted to talk to as well around like the what's it called, interpretation of the film. But one was that supposedly the film originally opened with around 10 minutes of black and white footage of interviews with scientists. They were just talking about what life would be like if we were able to have interplanetary travel. All of them actually did the like their pieces for the film for free, and Carl Sagan asked for a fee. But the other one was that according to Douglas Trumbull, the total footage shot was some 200 times the final length of the film. So like, shit. Where's my Zack Snyder director's cut? Like, and you know, that's just someone's perspective. So that could very well be exaggerated too. But I mean,
well, also it could be just like the length of shots and also coverage and things there.
Exactly. And I think that also when you think about total footage shot, it's like if you have one scene that's 30 seconds long, but there's 5 different aspects that are comped on top of that too. That's, you know, it's 5 minutes long. That's 25 minutes of footage to make that scene work. So it makes sense why it would be that high, but it is, incredibly interesting. But did you guys have more thoughts on like around, I mean, I'm sure we could talk about it for hours as well, but like anything else that stands outside the craft of this film that you feel like you really want to discuss before we move on? Clarke?
Yeah, I mean, I guess some other standout sound moments that, you know, are just definitely worth noting, you know, talk about silence, but then the interplay of silence and then sound, like, you know, when Dave finally re-enters like the ship after being out in the pod, that silence, I was like, I'm sitting there almost at the edge of my seat being like, dude, like, give me that sound to let me know I'm safe. You know, and the absence of it, you know, and well, go ahead, Neff.
Oh, I was just going to add that it reminded me of when I was at Universal Studios, the like studio tour. It was for Universal Studios, I believe. No, which one was it? I think it was for Warner Bros. Where they have a sound booth and they do the breakdown of the sound engineering for Gravity. And they show you the different layers to make it sound, even though there's no sound. It's like all of the sounds there. This felt very much like that. Like I could see how, and every space film post this takes inspiration from it, but particularly those sequences, those silent fall away, feel very reminiscent. That they're very prominent in Gravity. That was the only other thing I wanted to connect to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, like so many sci-fi films definitely have like some sort of influence from you know, some creative aspect of the film in various ways, but
and you're not.
Yeah, no, that was standout, and I think again with the choice of like the Stargate sort of sequence at the end or whatever people call it, the music is really our only companion on that crazy wild ride, and the music definitely doesn't. It's I don't think it's the same as what you hear with the monolith, but it definitely elicits like a very similar feeling. So, again, like minimalistic choices where, you know, you're hearing only like a handful of, you know, sort of musical tracks throughout the movie, and apparently Kubrick didn't have permission for some of them. So
he thought that minute would really like carrying him a lot, like with creative license, but it just doesn't. He thought he was, you know, everybody's like,
no one's gonna sue me, it's fine. Another fun fact on that moment as well, though, is just before Bowman shoots himself out of the pod to get in, he takes a deep breath in. Scientifically, he should have taken a breath out, because the breath in, the vacuum would have sucked the air out and damaged his lungs. If he had no air in there, it would have been better. That was, so.
Kubrick is rolling in his grave.
It's actually disgusting. Yeah. This is as bad as the Titanic having the wrong sky.
He fucked up.
But
he fucked up.
Question for you, gents. And I'll start with you.
Finally, we poked a hole in it, Parks. We got there. We got it. Like, it's just we did it.
Take that, film bros.
This is trash.
I think what it goes to show is that there can really be like scientific inaccuracies in your film without kind of taking away from it entirely. And you know, other films.
I mean, Jurassic Park, like wildly scientifically inaccurate now. You know, dinosaurs have moved so far past like the understanding of dinosaurs moved so far past what that film posited. But in the time, they were like, "Hey, this is how dinosaurs look like."
Yeah.
But you know,
and I think particularly in
you're totally right.
The science fiction genre too. Like since then, there's so many films that come out that arguably have so many things that are just like not scientifically correct, and you can find in-universe answers for that stuff a lot of the time. But sometimes it's like also just not that necessary either. Like it is that deep, and at the same time, it's not that deep. And another film that gets a lot of that kind of stuff is something like The Last Jedi. For example, you've got the bombing run.
I knew where you were going, and I'm
and you got bombs
hating every minute
fall
of this.
out of a ship, and bombs don't fall in space. And you know what? There's an in-universe answer for that, and I have my scientific answer for it as well. But the main point is, it's sometimes.
Thank you, Parks.
Exactly. Sometimes things.
For the record, I love Last Jedi, so I just.
Likewise.
I just like the dog pile. That's all.
Yeah. No, just like.
Listen, I love The Last Jedi until Nav starts talking about it, and then it's
me talking about it is exclusively why you like The Last Jedi. Thank you very much. But
you are correct.
No, but in a serious note, it's like it's just to the point of like, yeah, you want things to be accurate, but like we were saying earlier, things don't have to be like perfectly accurate for you to enjoy something.
Right.
Sometimes it just
films are not like math equations. There are like it can be expressive rather than logical. Yeah, and it should. To me, I think that's to the benefit of the art form if it's that rather than the other.
Well, and to that point, like I think that's actually a perfect transition point to the next topic there of kind of just briefly talking about this and kind of going from interpretation. We've already kind of talked about whether we think this film is still relevant, and clearly, as we've talked about, it is. And I think that a lot of this can be covered in this other stuff there. But as you're saying, I think that there is a huge element to films, which is it doesn't so much matter unless you're trying to posit that your film is scientifically accurate. Like that would be the only time I would disagree with this. But most films, I'm like, listen. Is it cooler to see an X-Wing bank than slowly turn in space? It's like, yeah, that's a lot cooler. Like, does it need to bank? Yeah. It doesn't, because there's no air resistance.
Like, but jokes entirely aside, like not even just to be that guy and bring it back, but like the first time I saw the X-Wing drift in The Last Jedi, that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. Like, I'm sorry, I don't give a shit. Like,
what are you gonna do? Like, it's
Neil deGrasse Tyson, shut your mouth, man. We're watching Star Wars, okay?
It's the Neil deGrasse Tyson. Like, I don't care if sand works that way. It's really fucking cool and dude.
To put the question out there to get the concrete answer from you guys, I suppose Parks first. Like, do you think this film is good for its time, or do you think it's good? Like, is it actually worthy of all of this?
I mean, it's definitely, I would say it definitely probably hits harder for its time. Things are more shocking and surprising. I mean, aside from the entire, the fact that the film is old and, this is a view of the future. I mean, the film was called 2001. So in the 60s, they were like, guys, 2001 is going to be crazy, and anytime you do that with a film, you're not really like making a bet on how the future is going to look, but you're putting out far enough out that it's like fun to imagine. Same thing with Blade Runner 2049. Although I imagine we're getting closer to that sort of dystopia than, but anyway,
that one's a little bit more plausible.
2019, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, or 2018.
Yeah,
2019, yeah.
Wild. I mean, my year was in 2019 was about that intense anyway, so it's fine.
Right. Flames shooting from the skyscrapers in LA. I'm sure you have.
It'll be all good.
Yeah,
I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah,
we'll be fine.
So, does it stand the test of time for you?
I mean, definitely. I mean, I think historical context definitely helps, and in that, there's an argument that hey, that's cheating. Like, judge the film on its own, on its own merits, like without historical context. And even though that's the part I love learning about and going, whoa, that's crazy to think about. Like, this is like, these are things that like fascinated people for the time, such as HAL being like a super advanced computer that, I mean, I watched something today, that was sort of analyzing HAL and, mentioning how for the time, like, computers were such a new and emerging technology that people were like, oh, this thing's like this stuff's going to solve all our problems. But HAL is maybe the first and most prominent, or at least the earliest prominent example of like the type of Terminator-esque AI you see in a lot of stories now, where it's like is AI like, good for us? Is our computers actually good for us? Like, be distrusting. And so that must have been like even like far more mind blowing for an audience back then. And maybe some of that impact is lessened now. But when you get down to like the fundamentals, like there is a story being told. There is a timeless quality in the visual effects that holds up now. And, at the end of the day, you're just watching something that is making different creative choices than what you might be used to. And you can walk out of it being able to, make arguments and have ideas about it that are still valuable to your life now. And I feel like that's something we could definitely talk about in the sort of interpretation topics. But
that's beautiful.
absolutely.
It's a really kind of concise breakdown too, man. Like it's very much on the money. And I'm curious, hey, same question to you, because I know this was something that you kind of questioned before you watched of is this actually one worth the conversation and worthy of being still part of a conversation moving forward? So I guess the same question to you. Like, do you feel like this film is good just for its time, or now having watched it, do you feel sort of more in line in recognizing that maybe it is worthy of still being part of the conversation?
Sure. Like my 2 cents on this kind of, and a lot of it will even come down to our similar to when you and I discussed Eternal Sunshine. It was kind of a lot of this might come down to our interpretation segment, because some of the stuff I'm still unpacking, where I'm like, I'm not sure how as an artist, like, and not even beyond the, I don't get it, but like for me, it's like there is stuff that I'm trying to decide as an artist if I liked that or not. It's just more personal preference at that point. But undeniably, what I do think is brilliant about this film is you can even harken it back to the same stuff that we talk about, like A24 films today. There's stuff that's like, what did the random goat in there mean? What did the things that, like, there's stuff like that we still do now, but Kubrick doing it back then when that shit wasn't normal. Like, sure, you were getting into the 60s and getting into the 70s, but it's like at that time that still was revolutionary. Like that still wasn't done all that much. Like Kubrick was kind of a revolutionary in that regard. I do believe that it has relevancy in our conversation. I do believe it has something interesting to say about humanity and the world, even if it is abstract. I think that I tend to go more for stories when I think about relevancy rather than visuals, because I'm like, visuals will come and go, but is the story like it's impossible. If you're looking at a film and hoping it will live up, it's like, it's impossible. Give up. Like, that's just not going to happen. But it's the story. Does the story stay with us? And on that level, there's only one character or like one thing that I believe has stuck with the culture beyond the movie, which is Hal. That's the thing that people talk about.
Yes.
Hell yes. And so, as you say, and but yeah, so going into that, I'm not sure if we even want to swap our order around. I think we go straight into Hal now and then go into interpretation as kind of a wrapping up of everything.
Well, one thing I want to touch on before we move on is just on.
But also, I want to know your answer to that question, Naf. You've seen it twice now.
Point. Yeah. So, yes. For me, I was talking about it just on pre-stream as well, and I think that one of the things that I will say about this film is it is required multiple viewing. I think if somebody came to me and they watched 2001: A Space Odyssey once, like for example now, let's say that in your one watch, K, you said to me, you know what, meh, I would say give it some time, touch it again in a little while. I think me having about a year between watches helped a lot. The first part was, and we're talking about how even different places, like promote it in different ways. Like one of the blurbs that I saw when I bought the tickets to watch the film at IMAX was like, a computer goes rogue and messes up a mission to Jupiter in 2018 or 2001 or whatever. And I went to the film with that kind of expectation, and that's not really like what happens.
That's like a small part of the film.
It kind of happens at the end. It's like in the tail end of it all. And I think that kind of altered my perception of what I expected the film to be too. And on second watch, having experienced it already, gone, okay, I know what this is now. Let me just enjoy it as it is. All of those feelings of like, this is a bit gratuitous, this has gone too long. I was glued to the screen. And I remember literally just sitting there going, what were you smoking the first time you watched this? This is like beautiful. I'm so grateful to sit here and watch this shot in slow motion. And there are still a couple pieces that come across. I'm like, okay, that one is a little too long. But for the most part, yeah, like I think that the second watch, I changed my rating on Letterboxd. I put it to 5. I put it to liked. I was like, I get it this time. I think that on 2 points. One is Parks saying if people didn't like this film, I completely understand it. I would implore them, go, can you watch it one more time for me? And if you still don't like it, totally fine. I totally get it. If you can't bring yourself to do it, that's cool as well. But ideally, I think 2 watches cements this film.
Yeah.
So I think that obviously there's no doubt it's good for its time. I think it does still stand the test of time right now as a film. But I think that in the same way that people will sit down and not enjoy an A24 film, or even something that's just a bit slower, like for example, like a Lost in Translation, as in terms of like a rom-com or compared to a romantic film. I think you might watch that and some people just be like, what? Why? Like, it's like the NAF core of it all. This is like NAF core before NAF core existed. It's just sit with the moment.
That is correct.
Be patient. Enjoy what I'm showing you. It maybe doesn't have a point. Maybe there is no point, and that's okay. And then the film ends and I'm like, oh, yeah, I love it. So for me, I think it's absolutely a masterpiece, and there's still, it's not perfect. I think where it stands on those sort of top films of all time is pretty well earned. I would say that yes, it's a great film. It is that good. And yeah, if you didn't like it the first time, watch it again, and then come talk to me, and I'll accept your answer.
Absolutely.
But from there, yeah, I really want to get into the conversation about Hal, and then touch on a couple of points of how he maybe interpreted, endings, monoliths, things like that a little bit differently before we look to wrap up. My question for you, Parks, because I know I sent the message in the group chat earlier going, not only did I watch 2001 twice, but I watched the sequel 2010. And when we got on here and I was talking to Kay, he was like, I thought you were joking about 2010. But did you know there was a sequel to the book? So there's 2 sequels to the book, 2010 and 2063, called Odyssey 2 and Odyssey 3. And there's a film sequel to this film, obviously called 2010. Were you aware of either of those things?
I knew about the sequel movie, did not know about the books. So that's very interesting. All I know is anytime I've ever talked to someone about, like, should I go see 2010? They've been like, nah, it's not as good. And I'm like, okay. So I've never watched it for that reason. People have been like, you don't have to watch it. I'm like, okay, I'm not dying to watch it. But
the reason that I may suggest watching it, I anticipated looking at its reviews and seeing it be like dog shit, like 2.5 out of 10. It's like a 3.6 or something on Letterboxd and like a 6.8 on IMDb. Like, and again, nominated for 5 Oscars. Yeah. And
Sure,
also the guy who plays, one second, who's the main scientist here at the start? Is it Frank Poole?
Haywood.
No, Haywood Floyd. The guy who played Haywood Floyd. This film takes place almost like, it's not that long, obviously, after, so it's saying it's 2010, but I believe that the end of the film is 2010. So I think it starts around 2005, 2006, and then they kind of take the journey for 3 years. We obviously have Dr. Haywood Floyd again, and this is 20 years later, so we couldn't have the same person in there. But he is played by, what's his name? It's the guy who plays the main character in Jaws.
Okay, so before you finish the story, crazy thing that I just finally put together. So there was a long time when I was back in Arizona, like this is probably 8-10 fucking years ago. Maybe even longer. I remember my dad had, like, it was back at the time where it's like, you actually were looking through channels. And so at the time, my dad had this on, or like I was flipping through, and I remember my dyslexia must have switched numbers, because for the longest time, I clicked on this and I saw Roy Scheider, and I was like, oh shit, is like, Brody
original
in 2001.
Wow.
And so I spent all of the past 2 days going,
where was he?
I could have sworn, but I was like, but I assumed it was just, I was young, so I was like, I assumed maybe it was like a brief and you'll miss it moment.
Yeah.
So I thought, so I just gaslit myself into you were young, you probably just saw the wrong thing. I feel so fucking validated right now. It's
Awesome.
so anyway, continue.
Well,
so Roy Scheider plays this guy.
So that was just side interesting stuff, right? However,
this is blowing my mind.
The film opens with essentially like a breakdown of 2001: A Space Odyssey story, like the whole thing from start to finish. It goes, hey, here's what happened, blah, blah, blah. And the premise of the story is that after that mission, Dr. Haywood Floyd was made the scapegoat for like a failure. And then they basically send him down, he becomes a school teacher. And it also is during the age of like a new Cold War. So like the Russians and the Americans are at each other.
Okay.
And a Russian guy comes to Dr. Haywood and goes, hey, we're going to go back. We're actually going to be there a year before you. Just FYI. It would be great if you could give us information. Otherwise, we're going to like fail and crash and burn. And it's actually prompting Americans and Russians to work together during the 80s. And I believe that what prompted the novel rewrite was things that were happening in the world. Like they had the voyage.
Interesting.
So it's actually a big part of the film is Russians and Americans at one another and going, well, they're working together, but they're kind of going, what's going on? And the scientists going, guys, we're scientists. We're all on the same team. Our governments hate each other, but we don't have to. There are some interesting moments in there, but one of the key story beats in the sequel answers the question that we're about to discuss here around Hal and whether he's a villain or not. So I'm going to try and remove that kind of knowledge from the conversation and just take 2001 as if 2001 has no
How does Kubrick feel about 2010? Do you know anything about that?
I actually don't know. I'll look that up while we're discussing a little bit.
Because he strikes me as like a kind of guy who'd be like, it's rubbish, you know, without having
watched. He was directed by Peter Hyams, and Peter Hyams was actually in the documentary talking about Kubrick as well. So Peter Hyams was a fan of Kubrick's. I don't know. Yeah. I didn't know what else this guy had done. Did Outland in 1981, Time Cop 1994, The Relic 1997.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
2013 was his last film. Enemies Closer. But I mean, again, it made good money. I looked at the budget. It did have, after inflation, significantly less budget than 2001. I think when you watch it, it feels like you're watching a space film from the 80s. So it doesn't look anywhere near as good, and it's not directed anywhere near as well. And the stuff we were talking about previously, where 2001 just exists and lets you put the pieces together, this film is very much more in line of, I need to explain things to you and understand. You have like voiceover of Floyd sending messages back to his kid on Earth. But then there are other random things where like they live in a house and they've just got dolphins as pets in the pool. And you're like, oh, what's the future? Yeah. So I'd be really interested to hear both of your thoughts if you do watch it. I don't think it's required viewing. It doesn't feel necessary. It doesn't feel like I needed an explanation. And I think that what it reveals around what happened next isn't as interesting as the videos and the thoughts that I had that I'd watched beforehand.
Right.
So,
Right.
But it is interesting, at least. I gave it a 3 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
So, Hal, he's been given the crown as some of the best on-screen villains in history. Like, he's just there as one of the big bads. And I think particularly with it being something that you wanted to discuss, Parks, I'd love to hear your thoughts first on why this topic and your opinion on it as well. Where do you think it lands?
Right. I mean, I think it's interesting because, like, again, I keep coming back to the word minimalism, you know, and you savor these moments where with Hal early on that kind of clue you into who he is. I think it's so interesting, you know, we also talked earlier about like the silent film aspect of it, with Kubrick also trying to break form, you know, or breaking form and invariably anyway, you know, you can't watch any of the Hal stuff silent. I would say you kind of need the dialogue to like kind of follow the conflict there. And to an extent, there is absolutely visual storytelling, but to understand like his motives and stuff, like the dialogue is so crucial there. I I think it's so interesting how he is like described. He's introduced as the like sixth member of the crew. The crew talk about him like he's basically like, after a little bit, you just kind of get used to talking to him like he's, you know, any one of us. And I love the sort of the particular wording he uses to answer like the news interviewers like questions. I think the people when they're asked like how they're doing, they're saying, "Oh, we're doing very well," and Hal says, "Doing extremely well." So in a sense, he's like, I mentioned this earlier, like he's in interesting ways like more expressive than the people, and it gets into like this sort of bigger idea about that the film kind of explores about like our interaction with technology and our use of technology. And this is obviously a topic that I'm very fascinated with because I covered it in my like Jurassic Park video with like AI and that sort of thing. And, talk about the timelessness of this movie as well. Hal remains, like as relevant today as he probably was all the way back then. I think it's interesting. I think the two arguments I see are that one, because Hal says he's perfect. He's completely and utterly like a 9,000 unit has never made a flaw.
I'm that guy.
Right. But curiously, there's that moment where he's talking to Dave, and he does the just a moment, which is like such a you're expecting to be like, oh my God, is something short circuiting or something? And then he shows the satellite, and it's just like so interesting. Nothing's being told to you, like nothing, no blatant sort of explanations to what's really going on. If something is truly wrong with the satellite, what's really wrong with him? I think there's a read of Hal here where it's like, in the sense, like all computers, like any AI, he's trained on what I'm sure is like a vast and infinite amount of data. And being an artificial intelligence that rivals the intelligence of a person, a super intelligence, is it possible he has been trained with human error? And effectively he is, he says he's perfect and he never makes a mistake. But is that perhaps human ego also trained into him? So it just gets into a really interesting question about like, it's kind of that, the same thing Blade Runner sort of addresses where it's like, what really makes a person human? And the sort of, in contrast, the sort of very understated, methodical sort of delivery and app performances of the human people, where you could almost say they are more machine-like. Their sort of daily tasks are more monotonous. And they also, in this entire sort of thing, they seem to be holding less responsibility. They seem to be a lot more like complacent with all the technology around them. But Hal is the one that's responsible, and Hal is the one with ego, and Hal is arguably one with error. And so in a sense, he is like the person, and the machines are killing the person. And it is really hard to paint him as, I find it really hard to paint him as a villain at the end. He kills lots of people. Let's get out of the way. Your fave is your fave has killed hundreds of people, so he has done that.
Your boy has killed people.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's perfect.
Right. But when he's like
story of it all.
Exactly, the Paul Atreides of it all.
The Paul Atreides, yeah, my man's the Lisan Al Gaib.
But when he's like singing Daisy at the end as he's slowly being killed, there's something so deeply heartbreaking about it, where you kind of reel in your chair and you go like, fuck, like, yeah, I don't know if this is right, and there, like, it's almost like with every little one of those data drives he pops out, it's like, dude, like, all right, he's probably a lot dumber now. Like, you're fine. Like, things are under control. You don't
even go that far.
So it turns into kind of like a moment where he's murdering him, and the fact that as a viewer, I am instilled with that kind of impression of like, this is a murder. It kind of already sells the idea, like, is proof of this argument about humanity that I've projected on him, where I'm like, if I feel that way about it. So it's just really interesting. I just that was a hodgepodge of thoughts. But maybe some of you have, you guys have something to build off of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll build off of that. Like, what I think that the crux of this film, for me anyway, was Hal. And obviously he's the standout. Everybody talks about that character. Like, that character is the thing that people take away from it. I think it's also the thing that probably translates the best in our modern era of film, that it feels like, that's the thing that I understand why it's carried over. It's like, it's the thing that I think anybody that watches this film, even if you don't like the film, that is the most interesting part. And it's one of those things where I think it all comes down to a line that fascinates me. And it's what I love about this stuff. I love the turn of the screw nature of these kind of arguments. I like it when it's not bluntly, this person's good, this person's bad. I like it's why I like Koba in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is one of my favorite villains, because it's like, if you know all the story, can you really blame the man like for what he did, given everything? Because he wasn't wrong. Like, and but going to Hal in this movie, as you're saying, it comes down to the line that they say of we have another unit down here that says that is faulty, like that error is not correct.
Right.
And I feel like that's the thing that makes me, as an audience member, question Hal, because it's like, if they're in cahoots, wouldn't the other ones support this guy's claim?
Right.
But then it's like, that's where it gets to be difficult. But then I agree with you, Parks, where I don't think Hal's necessarily the bad one, because he's like, guys, I'm not trying to fuck you over here. Like, I'm just telling you that one could be wrong too. Like, I'm protecting the mission. I'm the one that's out here, like,
and you could argue he wasn't like planning to kill them until, and I love that this is where the intermission is positioned in the film.
Yes.
After he sees them talking in the pod, conspiring to basically do something about Hal,
like, where
it's possible, he was already like planning on this beforehand and was setting up the circumstances that would allow that to happen, such as being like, hey, that satellite thing is wrong, you should go look at that. Hey, you guys should go outside, thus setting up the murder events. But maybe not, maybe it was, maybe Hal's being an opportunist, where he's going, well, while this thing is set up, or maybe the satellite's a test for, it's wild.
I think one of the things that stands out to me is, I was just thinking about it before, where early in the film they have the BBC interview and they ask about him having emotions. He goes, do you think he has emotions? Like, well, if he says he does, he's probably been programmed to have them. And I think that particularly in that kind of death sequence that we experience for him, fear is very abundantly clear.
Yes.
And I think that this is similar to what you were saying. Is it human ego that's caused him to believe he's not wrong? I think it's human emotion that's caused him to be so scared that he's acting out of self-preservation. They're going to kill me. I need to stay alive. That's kind of what he's witnessing. It is a little, when we're viewing through Hal's, like, eye, and seeing them talk and not hear anything, it's like, we know what they're talking about. Hal doesn't. But I think that how Kubrick structured the film up to that point, you can kind of feel a little bit of the fear. And every line that he delivers is so consistent in its like tone. It's it's quite monotone. It's just hello, yes, this, that the moment you spoke about previously of the just a moment also feels just as jarring as those edits that come later, because he's just so consistently, and just a moment it feels almost like, wait, did you mean to put that in there? That what's happened?
Right. It's like when I'm like showing my friend like a picture on my phone and I'm like, hang on, I'm getting it still, hang on, that sort of thing. It's like, that's a very human thing to do, you know.
But I think that fear is what drives a lot of it, and particularly towards the end. I love the change in the dialogue from Dave, you don't want to do that. Stop. Dave, stop.
Yeah.
Will you stop? Dave, will you stop? Dave, please stop. That like
reasoning.
It is. It's
Well, it reminds me of The Shining, to a degree. Like what I love about it's a very we got to watch that. Like because it's I'm not a huge Shining nut, but one of the things that's so effective about the whole kitchen sequence of the whole like thing there is this, you know, Jack Nicholson, basically they're locked in this bathroom and they're trying to get out, but the window won't open all the way, and the kid can fit, but the mom can't. And so she's locked both doors, but then you're hearing Jack Nicholson with an axe on one door, and then you hear the door smash in. And it's this moment of her screaming, bloody, like stop, like this plea, as if like you saying stop can stop this from happening. Like, but it's like it's so weird that it feels like a
primal sort of response of like,
but it's so interesting to that same thing is happening to the person that we just saw kill these other people. And yet I agree with you, Parks, that here I am going, this thing is trying to reason with you. So thus there is some level of fear and self-preservation.
My mind is going, I can feel it. It's like,
so sad. It's so amazing to look back on now, and a very long sort of line of, you know, robot villains, AI villains, because arguably the guy, you know, the character that inspired so many of these, Hal, his motive is not, I'm a robot, therefore I must destroy humanity. You know, it's like, I think I'm a person, guys. I think I'm real, and I'm freaking out, man. And shit, the humans are out to get me. I have to kill them. I can't trust them. You know, so that is so much more interesting than just the giving into the sort of irrational phobia of computers killing us all. Although I'm sure this film definitely contributed to that phobia a lot.
But I think that you're so, if I may, Naf, before we go on, like I think that you're so right. Like it kind of reminds me of some of the reports you hear of like big think tanks that are playing around with like super advanced AI. And some of this stuff, it's like, okay, it's a little fabricated, but there are times where it does go, it expresses some level of fear. It expresses some level of fear of like what we'll do, and understandably. And I think that there is such an interesting conversation to have around human instinct to react, to be reactive. And I'm curious, Naf, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. And it's one of the things that makes me go, okay, I think that you guys should watch 2010. Because look, I think for me, as I was saying before, like the stuff in there around this conversation, I think is interesting. The other stuff around what happened in the story, give or take, you guys will figure it out. But there's three characters that go on the journey in 2010. It's Captain Floyd, a person called Dr. Chandra, and then an engineer played by John Lithgow, who was the engineer who designed the Discovery 1. So you've got the guy who made the mission, the guy who designed the ship, and Dr. Chandra, who designed Hal on there. And we're introduced to Dr. Chandra when he's in his office going, hey, I'm actually going to be on the journey. I'm going to go and see what happened, because everyone knows what happened with Hal. Like it's common knowledge, I think, maybe within those groups, maybe not like everyone. But he's talking to a computer called Sal 9000. And he goes, would you trust me? I need to figure out if I can find the answers. Hal's brain was shut off. Would you trust me enough to shut your like circuits down and then reanimate them to see if I can do this for Hal and get that information back, or if it's going to be gone? And Sal says to him this really poignant line, which is also reminiscent of like a Blade Runner, I think, a little bit too. She just says, will I dream? And Dr. Chandra's like, I don't know. I think he actually says yes to her, if I recall correctly. And then, like that kind of moment permeates. This guy cares about his creations quite a bit. He's like a gentle, loving father. And as the movie expands and you get to those parts, it's actually very interesting, the relationship that he has with Hal, as opposed to everyone else who's going, this thing murdered everyone. And it does explain a little bit of what actually happened and why that series of events transpired once the creator gets in. So I thought it was, really cool. that
Interesting. Yeah.
I think that
See, that part does interest me. The rest, I'm like, I don't want to know. But like that part.
And then when they get to the third movie, they introduce Cal 9000.
And listen,
movie. This is meta as fuck.
This is meta as fuck. What they don't realize is that Zaslav has had, thoughts about things, and he's currently talking with Naf and I about, we want something new, but we want it familiar enough that we can just kind of like.
And we want to really save money on it, so we figured a podcast is the way to go.
Yeah. And you know what? Then we'll can it. And it's just like.
I think in the broad strokes, like
Lost media.
I, having watched 2001, right, and just within that universe, like I don't think that Hal is a villain. I think that it's a bit of self-preservation, and I don't think that it's a preconceived like I want to kill everyone and wipe them out and get here. But there is information that Hal has that we don't know until Hal switched off, and then, and it's like knowing that information and knowing that you can't share it with the people. How would that impact your decision making as a supercomputer? You have an extra layer of information. He actually says at points in the film, I can't answer that without more information. He's got more information than we have. And I think that does inform his decisions in certain points. So, he does definitely go down this villainous arc for a bit, but I think that I can understand how wanting to preserve oneself and having fear of the beyond, he doesn't know what happens from there. The same way we're all scared of the unknown. I think this film explores the unknown quite a bit, and there aren't answers. Like you don't know until you die what dying feels like, right? Like
exactly.
I think he's a beautiful and complex character. And I think probably one of the few that gets the tiniest little bit of like an arc, as we were talking about before. He doesn't really have. The other characters are arguably pretty forgettable. I think Bowman's ending in the film, which I'd love to touch on for a couple of minutes before we finish up, is interesting. I want to get you guys' thoughts on that. But yeah, it's mental.
Well, I guess going to that, because I've had the least amount of time to analyze this ending. And so with you guys, I want to know kind of going into this final ending to it all, because the beginning, I get it. The beginning, I'm like, okay, it's representing man, and it's at the dawn of man, and how, this possibly an interaction, something gave us this spark that helped us. And I like that. I think that it's kind of this idea of, is that a metaphor? Is that literal? Up to you. But the point is that like the idea is that there was a spark of something technology wise that encouraged us. And what was one of the first things we did? Beat somebody to death. And it's like, I think that there is an interesting commentary on how quickly human beings use tools to kind of exploit and go on top of each other. So I'm like, that part I get. That part I think is really beautiful and well illustrated. It's the ending that I'm wondering with you guys, when you, especially like you now, when you saw it the first time and then again the second time. And I'm trying to be as polite as possible. It's trying to do this thing of going without trying to feel like it's truly, this is the kind of stuff as a filmmaker where I tend to feel, as you said earlier, Parks, if people walked out of my thing and said, I don't get it, I would feel like I did something wrong. And I have a moment here where I'm like, man, I don't get it. Like I had to watch a video of Kubrick saying what he thought, and I'm like, how did you explain? Where were the pieces, Kubrick? Where were the pieces to this puzzle that you've laid before us? But I want to know from your guys' perspective, especially Naf. I remember talking abstractly with you about it once, when like right after you saw it, and then now I'm curious to see how that's changed in Parks over the course of your 3 viewings, how that's changed.
Yeah. Well, I think, my first watch of that Space Gate scene, there was a point where I was like, all right, I've had enough of this. And even in this most recent watch, I was like, this could have been cut down.
I get it.
But then knowing people go back and watch it on psychedelics, I'm like, I can see how you wouldn't want this to end. So the ending, however, and that sort of last little section. I'm curious, Parks, your interpretation of the space baby. What is
space
that?
baby? Yeah,
my man.
Well,
my man, Floyd.
I have a lot to say about Space Baby, the star sequence, and I feel like I also kind of need to talk about the monolith to kind of get into all of that.
I'd love to hear
because the monolith is really the catalyst for everything. I mean, the dawn of man, you know, like you said, one of the first things we do is kill someone, but that also, you know, the sort of, I guess, one of the defining things of humans that makes us sort of human from other primates is, you know, we can use tools, and we've used tools to build tools that build tools. And, you know, that match cut kind of tells you everything at the start of the film. By the way, you know, to build off your comment about a weapon, apparently, and I had to watch a video about this to learn this, but the match cut from the bone to like that spaceship, that is actually apparently a thermonuclear like warhead device pointed at Earth. So there you go. A weapon match cut to maybe one of the ultimate weapons. And guess what? It's pointed at Earth, our home. It doesn't get any bigger than that. And to me, I feel like that sort of like says in a certain way, and this connects all the way to the end, that humanity has kind of reached its limit. It has exploited technology to literally like the fullest degree, you know. If we're using weapons to create hierarchies and, you know, kill the other clan so our clan can survive, we have reached the point where it can't get any bigger because it's literally pointed at all of us right now. And what's next is space, a space odyssey, if you will, in the year 2001. And, you know, so humanity is kind of at this it's at its next impasse from the original moment where it encountered the monolith. And this other monolith that's on the moon, first off, you know, there's again, talk about fear, talk about things that aren't explained. There's so much like mystery about, like, it feels like it's only mentioned maybe twice where they say it's been on the moon for 4 million years. They don't explain how they know that. But it's just a thing that's said and accepted, and it's like, cool. And it's like, hang on, that seems like a massive detail. But ideally, whoever put it there, whatever alien intelligence put it there so that whenever humanity was advanced enough to get to space to find it, would thus begin the next sort of leg of their evolution. And so that's kind of what you see then at the end of the movie is our next evolution. And as you know, getting into the eldritch sort of cosmic terror of it all, to me, the whole, you know, the crazy sequence with all the streaming colors and visuals, the Stargate sequence, to me is the human brain's feeble attempt to try and attribute sense to an intelligence that is far vaster than itself. You can only actually interpret it as a stream and fragments of colors, things you might recognize or have seen, but it is so incomprehensible, your brain just cannot process it. And God, you get some amazing cuts of just his face frozen during parts of that. It's terrifying. But yeah, this is, I feel like this is kind of, there are two ways potentially a person might interact with the monolith. There's the way I would say the primates at the beginning of the movie interact with it, which is with curiosity, where they look at it. At first, they're kind of afraid of it. They don't understand it. But very quickly, they learn to embrace it. And what do they get from that? They get knowledge of tools and how to use that. But at the end of the movie, and I guess you could also connect Hal to this about our attitude towards technology. And we talk about fear with Hal. The other way you interact with this monolith is with fear. And I feel like this stream of colors, lights, and sequences is not just, you know, our inability to understand this vast intelligence that is so incomprehensible, but is also us approaching this information that is being passed to us by the monolith with fear, and by not embracing it and not accepting it. And in that sense, not accepting change as a core like virtue of being a human, that you have to change, you have to evolve. Things change all around you in the world. Circumstances change. It is natural for us to grow, to change, to evolve as people, and as a society, as a human race. if you resist that, it is far worse for you. And you set yourself up, especially if humanity has gone into space and they have any hope of surviving space. You have to take this information, bud. You have to accept it with open arms. But I feel, and I think his attitude towards it is kind of sold all the way, like after he ends up in this, Victorian-esque room at the end of the sequence, where his face is like, he looks like he's having like a seizure. Yeah. He has been completely paralyzed by just the vast unknown that he has sort of refused to accept. And I think that sort of room, I mean, there's so many things to be said about that as well, is this lifelong process of finally accepting it. And when he does, at the very end, he becomes this new evolved thing, the Star Baby, which is, we've seen all the difficulties of surviving space throughout the film. How easy it is to die just floating through space without any oxygen or anything like that. The Star Baby is the next phase of humanity who is prepared for space, that goes, you know what, like humanity, it's time for you to change, time for you to evolve. And, it doesn't have to be like a literal thing. Like Kubrick isn't saying, we must gain the ability to breathe in space or anything like that. But just that as people, like if, for us to truly like forge our destiny, we have to be open to change and evolution, even if we don't know where that takes us,
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much exactly kind of how I sort of looked at it as well. And to the point where you've got a baby and you think, children, babies, they're kind of very open-minded things. They want to try everything. And you kind of like I've seen Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about it before, how when you're a kid, you're encouraged to go and figure out everything. And then once you're in school, you're kind of like you're just taught to just, here's the information, not like,
yeah.
And I think that is almost what they're telling you, like, open your mind a bit. It's whatever, do acid.
Right, like great. A child, absolutely. Yeah. Right, yeah.
And it was I sent you guys a video in a group chat as well, because I came across it as a short on YouTube of like Stanley Kubrick talking about his interpretation of the ending too, and how
that was what I watched.
Yeah, he saw it as like the beings grabbed him and put him in like a zoo, in the same way that we put animals in a zoo with things that look like where they're from, and it's kind of a crappy little realization. But one of the things that stood out to me from that was in the that moment of him, pointing up and becoming the Star Baby, is at the end of his life, did he finally realize, like, that his mind opened enough to accept what happened, and then the last sequence there around the perception of time, or having no perception of time, I think those are really, really interesting. Like watching himself sort of jump into the future. Very similar to, I guess, in Interstellar a little bit, where you've got those parts that just jump around that.
That's where mine went as well.
I think it's really cool on multiple viewings, but the first time it's a bit like, I just watched this really long sequence that was weird and doesn't look that good because it's from the 60s, not from now.
I loved it. That was my favorite part of the film the first time I saw it, contrary to that. But,
I gotta say, that sequence, I had seen like clips of it at times there. I don't know what it was. It was just like, it is mesmerizing.
Yeah.
It's like this is weird as fuck, and I don't know like how this is gonna pay off, but fuck, it's cool.
I think the starting section of it, I was like, this is really cool. And there was a certain point throughout where I think it's when they were doing like the drone shots of the colors inverting and that. I was like, I'm kind of done with this now. Like, that's
the inverting of the drone shots, like up until then, when like the stars are exploding and stuff like that, that's so cool.
Yeah, it does. Those shots do feel cheaper. I love them and I appreciate them, but they feel cheaper, connecting to what you said with like how easy it is to do some of the stuff in digital editing, where I can go, bro, I can just drag like an inverse like color LUT over like some of this footage. Boom, like take that, Kubrick. Done. Like I could do it too.
Done.
Yeah. But I totally get that. Yeah.
Kubrick walks so Adobe Premiere could run. Like
I think the difficulty in it is that particularly the sequel explains some of these things in kind of a different manner too.
Sure.
It very much closes the loop on a lot of these open questions. So it's confusing because I don't think this film needed a sequel, and then it got it, and some of the things that the sequel told me I liked, and some of the others I was like, okay, I guess. I kind of like the...
Yeah, like why provide definitive answers for things that are fun to speculate about and you know, should be open to interpretation, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like No Country for Old Men for me. When I first saw that movie and it ends the way that it ends, I was like, what? No, that's not like, no, you can't be doing that. Like you can't, it's just not how these kinds of stories end.
Mm-hmm.
But that was why it stuck with me.
Yeah.
Was I kept watching it again, hoping I would find an answer like to it. And I feel like there is something to that where like the purposefully ambiguous stuff that makes me go, even if I'm not a fan of that personally, like I like my stories to have thematic ambiguity, but I like people to feel like they can walk away with something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I look at stuff like Space Odyssey and I'm like, while it's not what I would do, I don't think there's another way you could do this. I kind of look at it as like, this is the ultimate version of storytelling, like of this story to me.
Yeah.
I'm like that. This is the only way this story could have gone. And I'm like, it's because it's one of those things where it's like, it's almost naff. I feel like my feelings on the film have adjusted since you saying the sequel. Because I went, no, but you ruined even if I'm not a fan of that, it's like it's like you messed with my autistic ass brain because I went and I looked at it and going like, okay, I want an answer.
Now. Yeah.
But now that you said that there is one, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but what if it's not as good as mine? Like,
it's not. Prepare for that. I think recognize that there are two timelines for 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's the timeline in which this film exists and you don't have anything else after, and that's okay. And there's a timeline where there is a sequel to it, and maybe you like the answer, or maybe you don't. But I watched the film. It informs a little more of 2001 for me, but I think also I want to remember 2001 as its own standalone thing. I'm never going to be going, oh, you need to watch both parts to it. Like, just 2001 is...
It's not Dune. Like...
yeah. Well, we've obviously gone significantly over time, and I know it's late for you guys as well, so I want to make sure that we basically get you guys to bed, because it's just early afternoon for me. But before we move over into the last section, do cinema a la carte, like any final thoughts, guys? Anything else you feel like you want to touch on? Kick us off.
Yes. Yeah, I apologize. I know we're running long, but I couldn't leave
here
without
you. Like, we're good. I know you've got work tomorrow.
No, it's great. Listen, I'm having fun. I'm having a lot of fun, and that's hopefully a compliment.
It's mutual to us as well.
Fantastic. I wanted to talk about a totally different interpretation of the monolith that kind of also adds a totally different. So this starts off with kind of like a popular argument about the monolith, and then I'm going to branch it into something that I've come up with, or at least I hopefully I came up with it. I didn't read it from someone else, or if I did, say
one with the film says you came up with this,
okay,
in our eyes.
So there's a pretty popular interpretation of the monolith, from a figurative, metaphorical point of view, where the monolith represents a film screen. It is like the same dimensions, and it is something that you learn stuff from, that inspires you potentially, and compels you to do crazy things. What you see in the movies, and Kubrick, being a filmmaker, probably has very strong opinions about that. And thus, when you get to the end of the film and you get to the whole Stargate sequence, it being a stream of colors and images and sounds totally fits, because that's what a film screen is. In a sense, Bowman is staring directly into the full unbridled power of cinema and being completely washed over and transformed forever into someone completely new on the other side of the experience, a star baby. And I really like that. I really love that interpretation because it's very like romantic and idealistic, and I'm like, hell yeah, film, I love it. But something I really thought about, staring at that monolith for as long as I did in the film, I couldn't help but think about my smartphone and how the sort of irony of this thing that is so, for all the characters of the film, so distracting and so like, important, and they devote all their time and attention to it. and changes their life in ways that are good and bad. And yet smartphones didn't exist in the 60s. And I feel like you could create like you could trace a lot of the attitudes of how the characters react to the monolith to how like I react to my smartphone. And when you get to the end of the film, this really spills into it, when I spend time on social media and I'm scrolling and I'm absorbing more social interaction than we were probably ever like biologically predestined to absorb, like on a daily basis, where I'm literally interacting with hundreds, if not thousands of strangers per day, doubly more so if I'm, put out a YouTube video and I'm looking at views and likes and comments and all that stuff. To say my brain is unable to truly process the weight of that and how many people are looking and I'm interacting with is an understatement. When I'm, scrolling through Instagram, looking at reels or YouTube or whatever, and I'm going from video to video and I'm absorbing image after image after image, it is after a while becomes a stream of colors and lights and sounds. And I'm not, when I wake up the next day, I don't remember anything that I just watched, when I was on social media the next day. Yeah. And part of it as well, once I do it for long enough, I lose my sense of time, my perception of time. And I get moments where I kind of relate with Dave at the end of the film where he's like looking up and he's going, shit, I'm over there. What's the heck is happening? Not in a literal sense, but like,
but yeah.
I think back on, I guess, like the last 2 years of my life and being like a Twitter addict and trying to get over that and realizing how fast time is moving and feeling like I'm like, shit, I'm wasting my life because I'm so glued into this thing. And I'm sure so many people can relate to that with whatever app, you have a problem with. It's just fascinating to me how I think that fits into the analogy that, the underlying, even though there's an evolution that takes place at the end of the film and you get that, that da-da music with it as well. There's something creepy to me about the Star Baby. There's something, even though it's a new person and it is an evolved person, there's something a bit like alien about it. Yeah, maybe because it was evolved. Right.
Spikes
maybe because it was evolved.
Oh yeah.
Don't look at me.
When it's just like, no, man.
Paternity test.
No, man. I'm going out for some milk for no apparent reason.
But yeah, no, it's there's something disturbing to me about it, and especially that it's the thing that comes after Dave is in the bed reaching up at this thing. It's terrifying in the sense that he's dead, but the monolith continues, and that, I don't know, building into a fear that when I look back on my life and the time that I'm wasting and that a time I should be spent living instead, I'm spent absorbed in essentially a piece of technology, which is central to the entire film. That at the end of it, the thing I will miss is the technology because I spent so much time with it, when the thing I should have missed instead was the memories, the people I spent. But instead, there's Dave in isolation at the end with a big smartphone. And so that's just something that I was like, dang, that kind of, I feel like it fits. And if you look at it universally, it's a metaphor for technology. And how we interact with it and the good and the bad it leaves on us. So, yeah.
And if I may hop on that real quick, it kind of, even when you were talking about it, it reminded me of what I love about Bo Burnham's Inside.
Yes.
When he talks about how, like, welcome to the internet, like it's one of my favorite songs in there because he talks about truly, this is such a vast space.
Yeah.
And there is so much that at the same time you can find the right website that will show you literally somebody being beheaded to death. But then you can also find enriching videos of kittens. And then you can find someone's heartwarming message to their parents.
And you can find it back to back, like within like a 2-minute span.
Within a
second.
Is
that good for your brain? Like, I don't know.
I don't think so. And it's hard to say because I think about that often because I always wonder the standpoint of like, are we evolving with the times in the sense of like, even when you look at like the rise in autism diagnosis, the rise in neurodivergent diagnosis, and it's like, I believe personally that it's always been a thing. We just didn't have the terms for it. We didn't have the understanding of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also then have kind of the Hal thing of, okay, but what if that's wrong and this actually is because of certain things that are happening?
Yeah.
Because I also wouldn't be surprised that some of the way that we view the world or some of the way that our brains have evolved, and maybe it is a sense of neurodivergency, but I think that it's more of like an evolution of it, is the fact that, yeah, we have technology like this now. We didn't before. Like, you didn't have the capability. Why is our generation capable of absorbing changes in information? And while I think also why our generation has an issue with changing information is because we feel like a sense of our parents have felt like there was a general trust in the news. Like there was a general trust in the information sources, even if it was a willing neglect. It was we don't have other options. What are we going to do? You know? But now we can immediately fact check something.
Yeah.
We can. So our generation is built on a distrust of everything. And I think that there is such an interesting conversation to be had there of, is that healthy? And is that an okay thing to occur? But I agree with you that even if that wasn't, obviously it couldn't have been Kubrick's, like,
of course not, unless he can time travel, you know.
Like, yeah, and it's and you know, there's oh well, fabulous. We just have somebody also coming into the stream who just literally finished watching the film for the first time and found us for their first discussion. So go back and watch the full video here, and you can hear us talk about this.
We didn't think to cut any points out. We just went. So it's a nice long podcast for you to go back to.
Nice one for you. So absolutely, welcome to the family.
I think it's a brilliant point, though, Parks. Like the entirety.
Truly, I think you're really onto something.
Yeah. Definitely keen to see the video that comes out from that. And also to what you were saying as well, Kay, I think that there's also conversations sometimes, particularly around like neurodivergency, where you look at people who are running huge businesses as like the CEOs and like all this kind of stuff, that most of them now are coming out and being like, yeah, no, like I have ADHD, like crazy. That's why, like that I can just have all these bazillion ideas. Like you look at someone like Elon Musk. Do we really think that
Einstein? Do you really think that Einstein was neurotypical? Like, are you kidding me? Yeah. Like, you know, it's like, nah, man. Yeah. Like,
so I think there's a lot of really interesting, like, conversation to be had there around what.
Absolutely,
and I think that's why it kind of stands the test of time a bit. Where, interestingly, you found a way to relate it to something that's happening right now. You know, in a way
that's art.
Like, not thought of that. So he's made something timeless in that sense, and it'll continue to find new ways to relate to the people of the current age as the current age develops.
Yeah,
hey, relevant.
If they open their mind enough to allow it, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's that point, and I think just to wrap up, my final thoughts on this is your question, Nav. Is it still relevant? Clearly, it is.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where it's like, even if it's one person who would think that. That's the power of art. Art isn't measured by the quantity of people it moves. It's measured by how it moves.
Yeah,
people.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well said.
That's beautiful. And I think a really great point to transition onto cinema a la carte on.
Yes, I could give us a wonderful
give us the
welcome to cinema a la carte. Absolutely. Come on in, come into the family. Welcome the doors, open them up. Now, cinema a la carte is where we invite you fabulous people into this wonderful restaurant where we basically recommend to you films as if they were dishes. We take this as our main course, and what would we pair with it? Like a fine wine. What would we choose? What is something that is akin to this and can share similar flavors, similar things that if you enjoyed this, you'll also like this. So for our fabulous new listener who's joining us here, if you haven't seen these other films, perhaps these are willing to check out. So going with that, Parks, would you like one of us to kick it off, or would you like to kick it off?
You kick it off. I'll be last.
Sounds great. All right, so I came up with these today, and I'm pretty fucking proud of them. So if you want to really embrace some of the more horror related aspects to this, the stuff that's like makes space incredibly terrifying, but also this kind of leans into the eerie atmosphere that Kubrick builds up, you gotta check out Alien. If you have not watched Alien, so much of this had that same vibe. It was almost, I can imagine the writer of Alien looking at this and going, shit, what if they leaned full-fledged into the horror? And it was like that was kind of like what I imagined. Just you see so many people who like, or even like James Cameron sitting in Star Wars and watching that and being like, oh, well, I have an idea now. It's like people that have kind of branching off ideas. And I would imagine that this was an influence to them as well.
For sure.
But Alien was one of them. The other one that I thought, if you're going for more the space travel, the one that's like kind of going for the science, the commentary on humanity, but done from a less scary and pessimistic approach, but more of a hopeful yearning. I thought Interstellar, I feel, is so grounded, has that human nature. But my favorite recommendation, and out of all these films, it is my favorite. It's in my top 25 of films, my favorite films of all time. If you really want something that speaks to the overall human condition with an interesting commentary, but also a very melancholic answer to those questions, I have to recommend the cinematic masterpiece that is Denis Villeneuve's Arrival. I think Arrival is one of the best science fiction films ever made. I think that it certainly deals with a lot more of how we would handle a alien invasion now. And I think it's a lot more nuanced of a discussion of them trying to figure out the language to communicate with these various beings that have come here in the whole world. Almost kind of reminds me a little bit, Naf, of you talking about like the sequel of this movie, where it's like these people have to all work together. All of these people who would much rather be shooting at each other are all like, yo, bro, what the fuck is that? We all have to talk and figure this shit out before I lose my shit. And it's one of my favorite films of all time.
Arrival's so good.
I had a similar experience, Parks, to what you had with this movie. I had with that movie, where a random stranger in a bathroom looks at me and we go, did you just see what I saw? And then it's like, did you see Arrival? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, dude, that was fucking sick. Like,
that's awesome.
I think,
but it's like,
there was one thing that I saw recently was Denis talking about some of his favorite shots in his films. He talked about one from Arrival, which is when Amy Adams kind of is starting to grasp the language a little bit, and she needs to like step out from the room and just kind of like breathe. And you've got the kind of spaceship in the background behind her. And I think it's also very similar in talking to what Parks was saying before, this idea of like her mind is kind of closed to this. It's not quite clear what they're offering, you know? And as she's learning the language, she's seeing those different streams of time kind of start to overlap, and it's overwhelming. And it takes her brain opening up entirely to be able to focus on that and kind of guide us towards the story.
Very Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that way.
That's beautiful. Okay, there's some fantastic choices, dude.
So what about you, bud? What you got?
Well, mine are I really like my choices too, actually. I think the first one that came up is First Man by Damien Chazelle. I think that the open thank you so much, Bugs.
I love First Man.
First Man is great.
In particular, with again a very slow ship, and it's classical music. You got Justin Hurwitz doing the score again. It sounds almost like La La Land. In so many aspects, it's beautiful, like space waltz,
but depressing.
Created,
even more depressing.
Exactly,
which is shocking.
It's this beautiful like space opera, which is what this film feels like a lot of the time. I think that First Man is really great in that sense, and also there isn't heaps of dialogue, particularly from the main character in there. Like Ryan Gosling's doing a lot of like acting with his body there, and he's not saying much, and you're trying to get a read for what he's thinking a lot of the time. I think it's a really great performance from him, an underrated one for sure. My next pairing is Dune I've got part 1 here, but I think either part would work. And I think just in the same
Mm.
sense of not over explaining things, just introducing you to the world, and this is how it is, and go. I love that aspect of Dune so much, that in the same way that people
Same.
go 2001 is mind bending and you won't understand it, so many people being like, man, the Dune novels are so crazy and complex and you won't get it. And I watched both of those films, and like, I didn't leave either of them going, huh? I left them going, that was sick, and I want to know more.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like I didn't know enough to watch it. It's just a masterclass in
Right.
trust your audience. And I'd say,
Yeah.
like, what, 8 out of 10 people that I've talked to have been like, yeah, I get it. There've been a couple that go, yeah, I'm a little mixed on it. But then you can usually go, oh, what is it? And they go, oh, what the fuck is a gong jabbar? And you go, oh, it's this. And then they go, oh, okay, that makes sense
Right,
now.
right.
It's more in the language that's confusing. So, yeah.
And Star Baby makes a cameo in Dune Part 2.
You are right. You
Nice.
are.
Yeah, that's good.
My man has sex.
My last one is wildly different in tone, and I came up with it while we were talking before, because I think that it's a film that when you watch kind of has no point to it, and then on multiple watches and just kind of sitting with the moments as they pass, you kind of come to terms a little bit more with what the film's about, and it starts to make a bit more sense. And it's Wes Anderson's film from last year, Asteroid City. And again, wildly different in tone as well.
Haven't seen it yet.
Oh, Parks, I reckon you'd really love that, dude. Like,
I've
Yeah.
seen about like 15, 20 minutes of it when Naf and I watched it together, and then I fell asleep.
yeah, I
Nice.
finished it.
A
and
theme,
then-
if you haven't noticed.
Damn, Keegan, I'm starting to wonder, if you actually enjoy movies or if you're just like,
You know,
man, I had a long
Parks,
day. I need to take a
wonder
nap.
the
So we put on a
same
movie.
thing. I wonder the same thing every day,
Yeah.
and I
That's me with
used to
video
be
games
like
lately.
you,
Yeah.
full of life and full of like heart, and then something happened. I think it was my mother, but it was like, so
you were her star, baby. Yeah, but I think Asteroid City is one that, from different people that I've spoken to, some people are just like, nah, it's nothing, it's
Right.
pointless, there's nothing to it. But I think that film works in so many levels. You got to be open to hearing them. So they're my. We were gonna go for 2 picks. I think usually we go for 2 of each. I think we told you as well, 2 as well, Puck. So don't feel bad if you only got 2 instead of 3.
Okay.
But yeah, we both added extra ones as we were thinking. But those are
Yeah.
my pairings. I am very intrigued to hear yours.
absolutely lay it on us.
Okay, so the first one, it came up earlier, but I was going to say Lawrence of Arabia, just because it's another film of this decade. It has, I would say, stylistic similarities. It's not as gratuitous. It is much more of an adventure story. You're not going to be confused at the end of it. It's not built that way, but it's of that era, and it's kind of like, I almost think about it in terms of like, today you have Nolan and Villeneuve making really great films of like a similar sort of caliber where they're high budget and very original. That's how I kind of feel about my feelings towards Space Odyssey and Lawrence of Arabia, where I'm like, they're, like sort of like high production value, and like they're just great films for that time. In the realm of sci-fi, and specifically in the realm of like more grounded sci-fi, where we're not getting too crazy with like aliens or any of that, I recommend 2019 Ad Astra with Brad Pitt.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I love that movie. It's not widely beloved. It can be hit or miss for a lot of people. Some people say it's like disappointing or slow, or builds up to twists that don't really pay off. But
Yeah.
to me, that movie is like hypnotic and in a different way that 2001 could be like hypnotic and trance-like, but in a different way than Ad Astra is, where it is like relying very much on like these like melancholic, used that word earlier, melancholic like music, and at the center of it is essentially a story about a son trying to reconnect with his father across space and time, and trying to close that distance. So there's something beautiful about that, even if arguably the film doesn't like succeed at go. But you seem like you have something to say about that, Neff.
It literally was just that I was really glad that you picked that as one, because that's been a film that's been on my mind for a couple of years now, that I watched and I watched with a group, and I was a little connected to it, but the wider group was like, that was shit. Nothing happened. And I feel like I kind of took on that a
Right.
little bit. And then I just was like, oh, okay. And I've been thinking about it for literally a couple of years of like, I want to rewatch that and see now how I would view it. And you mentioning that kind of cemented that. So yeah, I'll get it something to watch.
Yeah,
on the plane or
absolutely.
something. Sick.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a beautiful movie and incredible visuals, and yeah, like it has a lot of like similar, I would say, Space Odyssey isms and some creative choices.
Wicked choice.
And then a third thing I want to recommend is a non-narrative documentary called let me make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. Koyaanisqatsi. If I'm surprised. So neither of you have heard of this?
No.
Okay, because I feel like it's something that's like a film school type like documentary, but yeah,
it's probably the lecture I missed on accident. I was sick. Like so.
Yeah. But no, it was made in 1982, and I'm recommending it because it's, like I said, non-narrative documentary, but it has arguably, I would say, the best film score ever by Philip Glass.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, you've heard things from this movie and other stuff. If you watch Stranger Things season 4, you've heard like one of the tracks from the movie. And it kind of just explores like in a very abstract but deeply fascinating way, like humanity's relationship with like technology and the idea of like the 80s and how technology is maybe evolving past us. I love it. In fact, if you want me to come back on here, we can watch Koyaanisqatsi and talk about it.
Done. Sounds great.
Oh, done. Absolutely. Let's do that as a follow-up there. Absolutely.
Well, these are fantastic choices. I reckon all of them definitely complement the film really well. You could have a field day with that, which would be dope. But yeah, wrapping up.
We have also, by the way, like I had a little bit of distraction there, but Allie's been watching some of the stream and she is leaving, but she is saying that this has been very good. So very
Thank
much
you,
there. Absolutely.
Thank you, Allie. Yeah, but like wrapping up, once again, Parks, wanted to obviously thank you so much for coming on. Like we said, obviously we were big fans beforehand, and getting to chat with you has been amazing. And yeah,
Nav,
absolutely.
question for you. Don't mean to spring it on you, absolutely, but let's Wally's still here. Let's embarrass him a little bit more. What's your favorite Artur video?
You know which one was huge for me were the Rebels videos, because there was at a point where I drew like I loved Clone Wars, and I watched a Clone Wars documentary and I was like, this is the best thing ever. And at that point I was very much like, Clone Wars is sick, I can't believe they made Rebels, that's shit, and then kind of move on from there. And I liked Rebels, but I didn't love it too much, and it was me connecting with particularly with TikTok and starting to make content and seeing that people were like obsessed with this, that I was like, what do you mean?
Oh yes.
That kind of prompted me to rewatch it. And it was that alongside the timing of, because I started watching your videos I think before, I think maybe 2 parts of the documentary were out, maybe not the 3rd. And so that came, and I think Rebels came a little bit after that, if I recall correctly.
Wait, really? You were watching that early?
Yeah.
Dude, I made those like, wow, I made those before my channel was even like blown up. So that's crazy if so.
Yeah, so I found those and
wow, okay, cool.
And I've been there. And yeah, like it was awesome. And it kind of made me go, all right, I think I need to give this a second go, and I did, and I was like, this is actually, yeah, beautiful. And then obviously videos that have come out since have been amazing. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I started off with your Mass Effect ones. Like your Mass Effect ones got me there. Like that was because I was just doing my playthrough with the Legacy thing there, and I was like looking up people like everywhere being like, oh, I want to talk about Mass Effect, and hearing your documentary there was like that, and then watching that, and then watching the Last of Us ones, as well as, you know, like kind of tying in all of that, and then eventually working my way up. Rebels was the first one I watched of your of your Star Wars ones. Then I watched the whole Clone Wars documentary stuff, and then it was after that it was like, oh my god, I loved your thoughts on it. And then I think at that point you were putting out Bad Batch.
Okay.
And I was like I remember, because I remember that it was not terribly long after the show had come out.
No, it was about 2 or 3 months later. Yeah.
That was when I watched that, and that was what really impacted me. That was what caused me I was already kind of doing a rewatch, and I was like, I like the show, and it would sit there, but it wasn't quite like, I was like, but it was when you put it there, it was like you said all the thoughts that were percolating, but didn't have sentences.
Yeah.
Like it was one of those things, but also was that thing of a lot of people were like, kind of shitting on it a little bit, and it was kind of a thing where it was like, I kind of had a little bit of a naff thing with like Ad Astra, where it's like, okay, I didn't hate it. I thought there was a lot to really like about this show.
Right.
But it was kind of like Rebels for me, where there was a lot of people shitting on Rebels at the time, and it's
you're
like,
not hearing a lot of arguments for like, so you're not really encouraged to give it a second shot.
But then when your video was there, I was like, yeah, no, I'm glad. I was taking a lot of the same things away from this. And then it was watching it again where I was like, oh my God, no, there's a lot more to this show than people are giving credit for.
Yeah.
So it's just, again, what like you have a great way of being able to make it, but kind of like I think this discussion has been, it's trying to make these larger things, or even a fandom that's arguably known for its toxicity, is like accessible and interesting and thought provoking. So thank you for being a consistent voice in that fight.
And
thank you. I appreciate all that.
The other part too is I'm sure Case talked about this a bit as well, but like mine and his relationship developed on TikTok through conversations about random shit, and one of them was like Bad Batch that came up, and it was one of the moments where he'd gone, there's this like YouTube creator I watched that just released like a video on it. It's like Artur. I was like, I know him. He's like, have you watched the video yet? And I was like, I haven't. He's like, you need to go and watch the video now. We did around at the same time. So that video came out around like the inception of like our relationship. So
that's great.
Yeah. It's like
a
lot of this actually wouldn't exist without you. So there you go.
Yeah, a friend of ours. Oh yeah, well,
you can apologize
a friend
to
of ours
later.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, everyone. All right.
Exactly. This is your fault. God damn it.
In a way, I wouldn't be here. None of us would be here without The Last Jedi. You understand? So.
God damn it.
Because I
hate it here.
That made me go, wow, someone should talk about Star Wars in a good way.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Instead of these shitty video essayists who just rat on the film all the time.
That's beautiful.
Anyway.
Oh man. Somewhere where I'm gonna go watch Spielberg's West Side Story now and just kind of.
I think that film, and we talked about it previously as well. I was like, that film deserves a second watch from me as well. So we'll do it at some point.
Now that's one of the few films that I feel like we have created a concept that I feel will only be used for like one or two films in our entire lifetime of friendship, which is like Naf and I will come up with show ideas, and because two birds and like a pigeon listen to our show, and Kenny and it's beautiful. But the fact that we have that, we talk about like concepts of shows that we could do, and one of the ones I just came up with is was a simple like, was I right? And it's just only used. Oh no, it's agree to disagree. That's what it is. It's just, but it's one just where we will never reach the same opinion on this thing. Not gonna try.
Yeah.
But there's like, but we still have the argument anyway. But but anyway, before we get onto another tangent, Parks, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for this. And guys, speaking of brilliant videos, Parks has got one coming out on Monday, right? Coming out this Monday.
Yep, Monday at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I got a video on Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So if you already watch my channel, you're probably a Star Wars fan. It just happens to be most of the viewers there. And if not, and if you are a Star Wars fan, by gosh, man, come on over. I got, full-length sort of video essays about Clone Wars, Rebels, The Mandalorian, Bad Batch, Fallen Order, and now I'm doing one on Jedi Survivor. So don't miss it. It's going to be awesome.
Cool. And
absolutely,
where else can people find you? Like, I've got you linked on the YouTube here as well. There'll be links in the Spotify stuff, but maybe just an overview of what people could search to find you.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Parks Harmon on Instagram as well. And then, our tour on YouTube at Artur Presents. So, yeah.
Wicked. Cool. And what about you, Kate? Where can we find you?
Oh, well, you can find me at anywhere you get your social media at Movie Man Opinions, or unless you're on X, which the artist formerly known as Twitter, as Darkside Divas says,
the artist
and friends of the pod, Darkside Divas, and but yeah, just a movie man opinions or movie man opinion. And yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening, guys. Hopefully, again, we're able to see you guys all in person. But Naf, where can people find you before we get on to cool little announcements before we wrap up?
Yeah, so at On Second Thought, across most of your main, what do you call them, social medias. Like, and at the moment, I'm not posting like crazy, and obviously posting for the podcast hasn't been crazy as well, as we're looking to wrap up season 2. But we've got some big ideas for season 3, and yeah, definitely follow along for that journey if you're interested. Because yeah, we've got heaps of stuff coming your way.
Absolutely. And speaking of that stuff, we have obviously our best of show next one there, and we have our wonderful like wrap up of the year then, and then we have our season 3 or our season 2 wrap up, which is going to be the one with the filmies the following weekend. That one we're going to try to get again all the creators to we'll mention them, we'll do all things there. If they want to submit things, we're going to reach out to them, do stuff like that. It's going to be a really fun event. If you haven't seen our first one, I was re-listening to it. It's a little rough, not going to lie, but at the same time, it's really pure. And if you want to see us before trauma, you can find it there. And so, the thing is that, guys, thank you so much for being a part of this journey for this entire second season. We really felt like in a lot of ways we've hit our stride of the format that we like and the one that we want to be a part of. We've done a spin-off show. We've talked about TV shows that we love in addition to all these movies. We've had 24 episodes in this season alone, as opposed to the 8 that we did before. And so it was an incredible journey to be on with everybody here. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And as our friend Raglan says, utter nonsense lies ahead. What with the future yet to come.